After selling my company for $30 million, I wanted to close out my working life with a cozy party, only to open the door to a spine-chilling nightmare. Just as we were about to raise our glasses, I caught my daughter-in-law sneaking a clear liquid into a chipped champagne flute, the one I've used for years. My heart stalled, but I kept smiling. When no one was looking, I swapped glasses with her mother, then stood there calmly and waited. 5 minutes later, her mother was foaming at the mouth and collapsing onto the stone floor, the shattering glass ringing out like a verdict. From that moment on, I knew it wasn't just one person who had fallen. My daughter-in-law's fate had been sealed by the very trap she never saw coming. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Miriam Blake, 70 years old, and I just sold the strategic consulting firm I spent 40 years building. $30 million, a number that makes most people dizzy, but to me it's the sum of youth, blood, tears, and loneliness. I thought I deserved a small party to thank the people who stood by me along the way. Turns out, that seemingly peaceful party was where someone planned to write my final goodbye. My son, Daniel, was the one who proposed the party. "Mom, let's celebrate properly," he said, voice sincere, those brown eyes lighting up like when he was a kid. "Kendra will handle everything." I smiled, not wanting to dampen Daniel's mood, even though something nagged at me. Kendra, Daniel's wife, has never been the housework type. A woman who considers loading the dishwasher beneath her dignity was suddenly eager to play hostess, planning every dish, every bouquet, every candle herself. That evening, our family home glowed like a summer gala. About 30 guests, friends, former partners, a few close neighbors. Light bounced off crystal glasses and the marble tabletop, making everything feel both elegant and warm. I wore the navy dress Daniel gave me last year and my work-in late husband's pearl necklace. I felt at peace until I saw Kendra watching me from the bar. She was smiling, a gentle smile I've never believed. As guests lifted their glasses, I turned and saw Kendra slip a small amber bottle from her purse. I knew instantly it wasn't perfume. She glanced around, then quickly dripped a clear liquid into the chipped champagne flute, the one only I ever choose at parties. In that instant, my heart clenched. The laughter, the music, the clinking glasses all went distant. I didn't scream, I didn't drop my glass, I just watched. Everything in my head clicked into a pre-drawn plan. If she dared to do this here, in front of dozens of people, she believed I'd never live to tell it. I smiled, pretending to listen to an old colleague's story about the company. When Kendra turned away just long enough to adjust her necklace, I quietly swapped my glass with her mother's. Lorraine Peterson was standing by the buffet, purse in hand, looking for someone to chat with. Lorraine is kind, naive, forgetful, and always trying to appear more refined than she is. She didn't notice when I set the glass right by her purse. 10 minutes later, as the toast began and glasses rose, I watched Lorraine take a sip and say, "Delightful taste, Sarah. Did you order this from somewhere special?" I didn't have time to answer. She froze. Her eyes went wide, her face drained, then she crumpled onto the stone floor. The glass smashed with a harsh crack amid the panic. White foam started bubbling at the corners of her mouth. People rushed in. Someone shouted, "Call 911!" Kendra screamed, hugging her mother. "Mom! Oh my God! Somebody help her!" She wept like her heart had shattered, shaking, frantic, a perfect performance. And Daniel, my son, was flustered, but I saw his eyes flick to his wife for a split second. A quick look, full of fear and quiet complicity. I knelt beside Lorraine and felt her pulse weakening. Chaos swirled around me, and I thought only one thing. If I hadn't seen that, I would be the one on this floor. When the EMTs arrived, I stepped back, perfectly calm. Kendra clung to her mother, sobbing, hands sticky with champagne, repeating, "She just collapsed. It was so sudden." I studied her face, not a single real tear. Daniel pulled me aside, voice trembling. "Mom, maybe you should rest. This must be a shock for you." I smiled gently. "I'm fine, dear. I've seen worse. I've lived through the corporate battlefield where every handshake can be a knife. Tonight was different, only in that the knife was held by family. As the ambulance took Lorraine away, Kendra stayed in character, the devastated daughter. But to me, everything was clear. When the flashing lights faded, I stood at the doorway with a chill down my spine, not from fear, but because I knew I'd just been warned. Kendra isn't just an unpleasant daughter-in-law. She's a failed killer. I went inside and poured a fresh glass from an unopened bottle. In the mirror, my face was composed, but my eyes had changed. I'm no longer the soft mother they could decide for. I'm Miriam Blake, the woman who once saved a company from collapse with a single contract. This time, I'll save my own life by starting the game under my rules. I wrote a few lines in the leather notebook on my desk. What Kendra poured tonight wasn't just poison, it was evidence. And I will turn that evidence into her sentence. Outside, the night wind rustled the maples, whispering a warning. I took a deep breath, shut the door, and smiled. My retirement party was over. But another game, survival and reckoning, had officially begun. The ambulance tore into the night, red and blue lights slicing across the villa's glass like knives carving through the last scraps of fake peace. I stood there for a few seconds, watching the strobes slip away beneath the tree-lined street, then grabbed my coat and neck purse. I knew if I let them go without me, all evidence would disappear by morning. Kendra was still sobbing on the porch, but her eyes were dry. Daniel stood beside her, phone buzzing nonstop, sneaking glances at me, the look of someone hiding something. "I'll ride with the ambulance," I said evenly. Kendra whipped around, breath hitching. "No need, Mom. Daniel and I will go. You're tired. Just go home and rest." I smiled, light as air. Lorraine is a close acquaintance. She collapsed in my home. I'm responsible. Daniel jumped in, voice a bit too pleading. "Mom, please, let us handle it. It's probably just a mild reaction." I looked straight at my son. Beneath the calm was panic. He didn't want me at the hospital because they needed time to cover a mistake. "No more discussion," I said, taking my keys. "I'll drive behind them." Both of them froze. I turned and walked off before they could answer. St. Mary's Hospital sits out on the edge of town, its pale hallway lights reflecting off cold tile. The smell of antiseptic mixed with wilting flowers at the front desk. I sat in the ER waiting area, arms folded, quietly watching. Kendra wasn't crying anymore. She stood to the side, hands trembling but eyes scanning the room, afraid to miss a detail. Daniel sat a few steps away, fingers interlaced, phone still buzzing, but he wouldn't pick up. Each vibration felt like an offbeat heartbeat in the hush. The ER door swung open. A middle-aged doctor stepped out, badge reading Dr. Matthews. "Mrs. Peterson is stabilizing," he said, calm but guarded. "We suspect plant poisoning, signs of an alkaloid in her blood." I tilted my head. "Meaning someone likely put something in her drink?" He glanced at me, then gave a small nod. "We can't confirm yet, but the signs are strong. This compound doesn't occur naturally in food." I heard Kendra's sharp, scared inhale. "No way! It must be the salad, or the cheese," she stammered. "Dr. Matthews just made another note. We'll send samples out." "We'll know soon." I set a hand on my chest and let out a little relieved sigh. Good thing she only had a few sips of champagne. If it had been more... Kendra went pale. Panic flickered across her face, then she dropped her gaze. Daniel avoided looking at me or the doctor. He nodded, voice off key. "Thank you, doctor. We just want my mother-in-law to be okay." "Of course," I said softly, but in my mind, every word and gesture was logged as living evidence. When they wheeled Lorraine out of the ER, I stepped closer. She was pale but breathing, arms dotted with IV marks. I brushed her hair back gently. Kendra hung back, unwilling to approach. Her lips were pinched, her eyes unfocused. I could almost hear the gears grinding as she hunted for an exit strategy. "She needs overnight observation," the doctor said. "We'll keep her for further checks." I nodded. "Good. I'll stay here with her." Daniel cut in immediately. "No, Mom. Go home and rest." "Kendra and I will stay." I smiled at my son, that smile, the one that makes him look like a kid caught lying. "Daniel, did you forget? I never leave before a contract is signed." He opened his mouth, then shut it. Finally, he just nodded. That night, in the hospital waiting room, I sat with an old magazine while keeping my ears open. Near midnight, Kendra slipped outside to make a call. I followed at a distance and stopped a few yards back, behind a fake plant screen. "No, I told you. The glass had a tiny chip. It couldn't be a mistake," she whispered, voice shaking. "The doctor said alkaloid. I don't know how this happened. Maybe they mixed up the samples." Silence. He's still calm. "But what if she suspects?" I'd heard enough. Back at my seat, I took out my pen and wrote in the leather notebook. Kendra said he's still calm. That means Daniel knows. They're in it together. I closed the book, leaned back, and exhaled slowly. No rage, no fear, just certainty. I was in the middle of a hunt, and I was the prey they had just lost track of. Near dawn, the doctor said Lorraine was out of immediate danger but needed more monitoring. Hearing that, Kendra covered her face and burst into tears as if redeemed. In her eyes, I saw only one thing: fear of being exposed. Daniel came over, voice gentle to the point of excess. "Mom, why don't you go home and rest? I'll stay with my mother-in-law. We've got a lot to handle tomorrow." I looked out the hospital window where the first light touched the empty parking lot. "No, I'll come along," I said evenly. "Someone nearly died in my home. If the police ask questions, I need the details." Daniel pressed his lips together. "No need, Mom. I'll talk to them." "Fine," I said. "But remember this, they'll ask why she drank the chipped glass, the one only I use. Don't look rattled when they do." He froze. Just a second, but enough. I turned and walked out before he could respond. Back home, the early light filtered through the window, washing the kitchen where it all began. The glasses were gone, but a faint champagne stain marked the stone counter. I didn't need forensics to know. Kendra had someone wipe down the scene. I poured myself a red from a freshly opened bottle, the scent of wine lifting into the cold morning air. I sat, opened the leather notebook, and wrote the first line of the war I was about to wage. Tonight, they made the biggest mistake of their lives. I paused, listening to the wall clock tick. It wasn't time passing anymore, it was a countdown. Because I, Miriam Blake, who has survived dozens of cutthroat deals, had started recalculating every move, every trap, every traitor under my own roof. And when this game ends, there will be only one true survivor. I never believed greed could make someone forfeit their humanity until I became the target. After that night at the hospital, I couldn't sleep. The lamplight pooled over the open page where my last line still glistened in fresh ink. They just made the biggest mistake of their lives. I sat there a long time, listening to the clock tick. The wind hissed through the doorframe, then poured a little more wine. In 70 years, I've faced opponents far shrewder than Kendra, people who preyed on pride, trust, even motherhood. But no one had been reckless enough to go for my life. And worse this time, it was family. I took the checkbook from the drawer and flipped through the pages. The ink was still bold, the handwriting neat. $15,000 for kitchen remodel in 2019. $25,000 temporary investment in Daniel's architecture firm in 2020. $50,000 to help buy the house in Westfield. Dozens of smaller items. Tuition for my grandchild, birthday gifts, help during a tough time. Added up, nearly $200,000, and that's only what I have paperwork for. There were countless calls when Daniel's voice was tight. "Mom, I need a few thousand to make payroll, just temporary." I wired the money again, without asking why. What mother doesn't want to believe her son is just going through a rough patch? Now, staring at those cold numbers, I saw it clearly. I wasn't helping. I was funding their money habit. Kendra has never really worked. She runs a small jewelry boutique in a mall, selling only a few pieces a month, yet constantly bragging about booming revenue. Every visit she wore something new: a diamond bracelet, a Hermes bag, Louboutin heels. And Daniel, the boy who once sketched houses with a pencil, had become a man buried in debt, nodding along to every suggestion his wife made. I started digging quietly. A few old friends in finance owed me favors. It took one morning to get the full picture of my son and daughter-in-law's finances. The Westfield house had been refinanced 3 times in 4 years. 2 luxury cars, a BMW and a Mercedes, still on payments. 4 maxed-out credit cards, with total balances over $80,000. Daniel also took a commercial bank loan, using his own company as collateral, even though the business is nearly bankrupt. I looked at the report with a heavy heart. No more doubt they were sinking into a bottomless debt hole. And I, the trusting, generous mother, was their last funding source. The next morning, with the lights still weak, the phone rang. Kendra flashed on the screen. I picked up. "Good morning, Mom," her voice syrupy like she was swallowing panic. "I just wanted to ask, how are you feeling? Any fatigue or dizziness?" I sipped my coffee and answered evenly, "No, I feel better than ever." Silence for a few seconds, then a forced laugh. "I'm just worried after last night." Anyone would be shaken. "Of course," I said softly. "Good thing Lorraine only drank a little. If it had been my glass, you'd be talking to the police today." I heard her swallow. Her voice broke. You think it was the champagne?" "I don't think anything," I said and hung up. The air in the house suddenly grew heavy. I turned to the kitchen and stopped at the champagne bottle, still 3/4 full on the counter. The glass caught the morning sun, looking innocent, but I knew inside was the truth. I carefully put on gloves, slipped the bottle into a plastic bag, and set it in a separate fridge drawer. From now on, it wasn't a drink. It was evidence. Sitting in my study, I replayed every small detail. Kendra's eyes, her shaking hands when she saw me at the hospital, Daniel's eagerness to get me to go home and rest. There was no doubt anymore they miscalculated. They thought I'd be naive, die quietly, and leave a $30 million estate to be split cleanly under the old will. But what they didn't know, I've never walked away from the chessboard before. The match is over. I opened my computer and reviewed the sale documents. The wire sat intact in my bank account, uninvested, untouched. I remembered Daniel saying, "Mom, let me help you manage it. That's a lot of money. You should relax." I'd smiled then, thinking my son truly cared. Looking back, it was a setup. Kendra wanted control of the money. Daniel wanted to keep me within reach, and I was still playing the soft mother they thought they could manipulate. That noon I went to the neighborhood supermarket for a few things, an excuse to walk and think. People say old age brings fear of loneliness. Maybe. But I'm not afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of trusting the wrong person. On the way back, I stopped at a small copy shop run by a former employee of mine. "I need a few documents duplicated," I said, placing a sealed envelope on the counter. He looked up, recognizing me. "This seems important, Mrs. Blake. Let's call it a contingency," I said with a thin smile. Back home, I opened the door and felt the house go unfamiliar. A place once full of laughter now sat silent and cold. I looked around. The kitchen, the living room, the stairs, each corner holding a memory. But now, those memories were shadowed by betrayal. I poured another glass of wine, sat at the table, and clicked my pen. Daniel owes the bank. Kendra spends like a queen. House refinanced 3 times. 2 luxury cars unpaid. Credit cards past due. Debt on top of debt. They can't wait for me to die naturally. They chose the shortest and stupidest path. I closed the notebook, my chest cooling. When I was young, I lost a deal because I trusted the wrong partner. I swore I would never let anyone kill me with my own trust again. This time it isn't the marketplace. This time it's the family. Battlefield. At sunset, the house sank into a soft orange glow. I stood by the window, watching my reflection in the glass. The woman in the mirror had silver hair and tired eyes, but behind them was absolute clarity. I set my hand on the leather notebook and whispered, like a vow, "This isn't suspicion anymore. This is a survival campaign. Kendra may think she's won a small round. But she forgot I've survived people 100 times smarter than she is, and when this play ends, the one exiting the stage won't be me." The next morning, I drove downtown to the familiar red brick building on Maple Avenue, the office of Thomas Keegan, my attorney for over 20 years. He's the one I trust completely. Discreet, meticulous, always 3 steps ahead. Inside, it smelled of coffee and old leather from the Chesterfields, light streaming through big windows onto neat stacks of files. Keegan looked up as I entered, surprise and concern crossing his face. "Miriam," he said, warm and measured. "It's been a while since you dropped by unannounced. What's going on?" I sat, took off my gloves, and met his eyes. "Thomas, I need your help, and this time it's not about contracts or equity. It's about my life." He paused, then set his pen down. "Tell me." I told him everything, every detail, the party, the chipped flute, Kendra's hand pouring the clear liquid, Daniel's shaken stare, Lorraine collapsing on the stone. I left nothing out. When I finished, the room went quiet. Keegan braced his hands on the desk, thinking hard. "You're certain you saw Kendra put something in the glass?" "I don't doubt my eyes, Thomas," I said, cool and firm. "But I also know if I only accuse without proof, I'll be dismissed as paranoid." He nodded. "Correct. You can't accuse attempted murder without chemical evidence. The champagne bottle, you still have it? It's in a separate fridge drawer. No one's touched it. Good. However," he looked up, gaze turning serious, "I'm afraid this won't stop there. If they sense your suspicion, they may pivot to a legal attack." I frowned. "Meaning?" "They can petition the court for guardianship, claim you're incompetent due to age or memory issues. Then all assets, including that $30 million, would be controlled by the guardian, and guess who the court would look to first?" I understood at once. "Daniel?" Keegan nodded. "With your very crafty daughter-in-law behind him." I leaned back, hearing my own heartbeat not from fear but anger. I've battled infamous CEOs, been sued to force a price cut, been threatened with bankruptcy, but no one has ever dared label me mentally unfit. "I won't let them," I said, my voice rough with restraint. "And you won't be alone," Keegan replied. He opened a leather notebook, wrote a few lines, then looked up. "We need a 3-layer strategy. Hit directly, defend tightly, and leave an unbreakable legal footprint. Layer 1, independent mental evaluation. You need a capacity assessment by a senior psychiatrist," Keegan said. "Not their hospital and independent clinic, notarized and sealed. If anyone later claims you're incompetent, we'll have official proof dated beforehand." I nodded. "I'll do it now. Send a copy to you and to the Asset Management Bank. Layer 2. Update the will and establish a trust." Keegan pulled a file from the drawer. "Your old will still makes Daniel the primary heir. That shouldn't stand. I recommend a trust assets only disperse under conditions you set. For example, a small yearly stipend, and full forfeiture to charity if the beneficiary commits a crime or comes under criminal investigation. I gave a thin smile. Fitting for our circumstances. Exactly. We'll also add a clause. If anyone attempts to have you declared incompetent, the trust automatically voids their inheritance. Rights. That's layer 2. Warmth returned to my chest. For the first time in days, I felt control. Layer 3. Personal security system. You live alone, right? Keegan asked. Yes. Then we need a professional security firm. I know a team that works with high-net-worth seniors' cameras, motion sensors, a panic button direct to police. They can also test food and drinks periodically. If someone tries a second time, they won't get it. I looked at him, the window's dim light touching the face of the man who helped me through dozens of lawsuits, now drawing up a plan to keep me alive. I never thought, I said softly, that 70 would start with protecting myself from my own child. Keegan closed his notebook, voice steady. Miriam, don't let emotions lead. People kill in many ways: knife, poison, or even silence. The only way to survive is to confront it. We stayed 2 hours to complete the preliminary filings. I signed each page: new will, medical directives, a limited financial power of attorney, all notarized on site. Keegan said he'd send copies to the bank vault and the asset management firm in the morning. As he set the pen down, I saw my reflection in the conference table glass. A silver-haired woman, face lined by time, eyes bright, cold, unshakable. I stood, grabbed my bag, and shook his hand. Thank you, Thomas. I was afraid, but not anymore. He smiled, gaze firm. You don't need to be afraid. They do. Outside, a fall breeze moved through the turning maples. I walked slowly to my car, feeling something both strange and familiar rise in me, the feeling of fighting for myself. As I settled into the driver's seat, I looked in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back wasn't a frail old lady anymore. She was someone who'd built an empire from nothing, and this time she was gearing up for the biggest counterattack of her life. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Sunlight slipped through the white curtains and pooled on the glossy hardwood, the same spot where Daniel used to play as a boy. Today, this house wasn't a refuge, it was a fortress. At exactly 8 a.m., the security team Thomas Keegan recommended arrived. 3 men in light gray uniforms worked carefully, without small talk. They installed mini cameras at every entry, the hallway, and the living room. Motion sensors were tucked discreetly behind framed art and bookcases. In the coffee table, they set a hidden panic button under the wood surface. One tap would send an alert straight to the police. All data goes to a private cloud. Only you have access, the lead tech said, voice low and steady. I nodded, signed the work order, and watched them pack up. In the hushed house, only the porch leaves whispered in the wind. I touched the button hidden under the table, a feeling of safety tinged with bitterness. At 70, I never thought I'd need this system to protect me from my own family. That afternoon, a courier from Keegan's office brought a thick envelope stamped with a red seal. I sat at my desk, hands slightly shaking as I opened it. Inside were my new will, trust documents, and medical directives, everything finalized, signed, and properly certified. Each page felt like both relief and heartbreak. I read slowly, stopping at the asset distribution. Daniel Blake, a fixed stipend of $50,000 per year, for life, non-transferable. Kendra Blake, no inheritance of any kind. The remainder, including all accounts, equity, real estate, and proceeds from the company's sale, goes to the National Cancer Research Fund and the Elder Financial Abuse Support Organization. I sighed. Not out of regret, but because a mother had finally cut the last thread of illusion. I murmured to myself, Son, I'm still giving you enough to live, but no longer enough to hurt anyone. That afternoon, I called Daniel and Kendra to invite them over for tea. I kept my voice light, as if I wanted to smooth the air. Kendra brightened immediately. "That's wonderful, Mom. I was just about to bring some macarons. We could all use a little break after these tense days." I smiled into the phone. "Exactly, dear. Maybe it's time we spoke plainly just once." Before they arrived, I brewed mint tea and added some butter cookies to the tray. On the table, between the white porcelain pot and the crystal cups, I placed a blue folder, an unsealed copy of the new will, no red stamp, but enough to make a point. I wanted to test their reactions. When the doorbell rang, I was ready. Daniel came in first, trying to act casual. Kendra followed, floral dress neat, light makeup but lips a little dry. She forced a smile when she saw me. "You look great, Mom," she said. "Such a relief to see you doing better." "Thank you, dear. I'm fine," I replied, pouring tea. We sat around the table. The silence was so tight the spoon against the cup sounded loud. I smiled gently and dropped the line as if offhand. "By the way, I updated my will and the legal paperwork yesterday." The spoon slipped from Daniel's hand with a small clink that rang in my ears. Kendra froze, her cup suspended midair. "The will?" she asked with a strained smile. "Do you think that's necessary?" "Everything's fine as it is." "Of course, but I'm not getting any younger." "I just want everything in order," Daniel spoke up, trying to keep his voice level. "So, did you change much?" I looked at them, still easy as if we were talking weather. "Not much. I just think some places need the help more. I chose a few trustworthy charities." They glanced at each other, panic flashing too fast to hide. I saw Kendra's hand pinch the hem of her dress. The air thickened. Then, like reading from a script, Kendra found her smile again and spoke in that syrupy, faux gentle tone. "Mom, I understand wanting to do something meaningful. But Daniel and I really worry about you living alone like this. After what happened, don't you feel scared?" I sipped my tea, calm. "No, this house holds a lot of memories. I feel safer here than anywhere. But if something happens, who would know?" Daniel cut in. "We've been talking. Maybe you should consider a place like Cedar Ridge. It's not a nursing home, Mom. It's a senior resort medical staff, security, everything you could need." Kendra jumped in smoothly. "Exactly, Mom. They have a golf course, a spa, arts programs. It's like a 5-star resort. The only thing is, to secure a good spot, there's an entrance fee of about $400,000. But don't worry, we'll handle the paperwork." I tilted my head, feigning thought. 400,000? Sounds reasonable. For people planning to stay there forever. Kendra's smile went stiff. Daniel cleared his throat and shifted. "We just want you safe. After what happened to Mrs. Lorraine, we don't want anything worse." "Yes," I said quietly, eyes settling on their cups. "Anything worse." They both looked at me, but I only smiled and lifted my cup, ending the topic. The conversation wore a peaceful skin, but every glance carried a fuse. When they stood to leave, Kendra wrapped her arms around me, her perfume cloying sweet to the point of fake. "I'm glad you're open to considering Cedar Ridge," she said. "We only want what's best for you." I patted her shoulder lightly. "I'll think on it. Big plans need time." Her smile held tight. Daniel kept his eyes down. They left in silence. I closed the door and walked to the small control panel on the wall instead of going back to the living room. On the camera screen, I saw them by the car in the driveway. The wind lifted Kendra's skirt hem, but her face was stormy. She jabbed a finger at Daniel, speaking fast. He shook his head and slammed his fist on the plast. "Wheel." They argued hard enough that I could read the words on their lips. "You promised she'd sign." "You lied to me." "Keep it down. The neighbors can see." I watched them and felt no pain anymore, only something cold and definite. They weren't regretful. They were afraid of losing. On the screen, The car finally rolled through the gate. As they left, I looked at the camera feed and saw two people who'd pretended to love me, bickering like botched accomplices. I didn't feel joy, only relief. And you, if you stood where I stood and saw that naked truth, what would you feel first? Pain or relief? Tell me in the comments. Maybe we'll find the answer together. I sat back down and touched the still warm cup. A thought cut clean and sharp as a blade. They think I'm weak, but the only weak thing in this house is their honesty. I smiled slightly. The game had only just begun. 3 days after that tea, a fine rain fell, the sky draped in silver gray like mourning cloth over the rooftops. I was rereading the trust paperwork when the doorbell rang. On the camera, I saw Lorraine Peterson, Kendra's mother, standing under the awning in a wrinkled raincoat, face pale, eyes uncertain. I opened the door. "Good Lord, Lorraine," I said softly. "You shouldn't be out like this." She offered a weak smile, lips cracked. "I had to come. I need to speak privately, Miriam." I brought her in and made hot ginger tea. In the light, I could see she'd grown thinner, with dark half-moons under her eyes like someone who hadn't slept in days. Her hands trembled around the cup. "What did the doctor say?" I asked. "Mild poisoning," she said, voice catching. "They suspect a foreign substance, some alkaloid, but Kendra told me it was just a reaction to vitamin supplements." I studied her. "Do you believe her?" Lorraine shook her head slowly. "No. I remember a few things, Miriam. I remember holding the champagne glass, tasting something strange, bitter, metallic. Earlier, I saw her at the drink table with a small amber bottle in her hand. I didn't think anything of it until I woke up in the hospital. The room went still. Rain ticked on the eaves like a metronome. I set my cup down and met her eyes. "Lorraine, I'm going to say something and I need you to stay calm." She swallowed and gripped the cup. "Go on." That champagne was originally mine. I saw Kendra pour something clear into it, and I switched glasses with you. Lorraine went rigid. Her face blanched, then shook. A tear fell and shattered on the table like rain on glass. "Oh my God," she whispered. "She meant to kill you, and I almost died in your place." I nodded, voice low. "I know, and I'm sorry, Lorraine." I didn't expect her to act in a crowded room, but because she did, I saw her true face. She shook her head, tears spilling. "I'm her mother, Miriam. I gave birth to her, raised her. I thought she was just greedy, not capable of murder. God. I never imagined I'd say these words about my own daughter." I set a hand on her shoulder. "This isn't your fault. But if we stay silent, she'll keep going. Next time it might be me or someone else." She looked at me, pain hardening into resolve. "What do you want to do?" "I want to expose Kendra with truth and evidence. Not just to protect me, but to stop her from hurting anyone else." I stood and took a leather notebook from the drawer. On the newest page, I'd written a few spare lines. Kendra motive, financial. Daniel passive accomplice. Evidence, champagne bottle, Lorraine's testimony. I looked up. "Will you testify if needed?" Lorraine gazed out at the rain streaking the glass. After a long moment, she nodded. "I can't cover for her anymore. She has to face what she's done. If you need me, I'll testify." Her words cracked through the quiet like thunder. My nose stung not from fear, but from the sudden certainty I wasn't alone anymore. That afternoon, after Lorraine left, I sat at the desk, opened my contacts, and found Naomi Pierce, a name Thomas Keegan had mentioned. Naomi is a private investigator who's worked with major corporations, specializing in money laundering and financial fraud. When she answered, her voice was husky and crisp. "Pierce Investigations. This is Miriam Blake. Thomas Keegan referred me. I need a financial investigation on my son Daniel and his wife Kendra." She didn't ask why. Can you send me their addresses, any account info, or businesses they've owned? I have everything. They're in debt, and I need to know what they've hidden. I want every loan, credit card, contract, life insurance policy, especially anything with my name on it. Naomi replied quickly. Understood. Give me 48 hours. I'll find it. That evening, a text arrived from Lorraine. I spoke to the doctor. He confirmed what was in my blood could not be a vitamin. I'm ready whenever you are. I read it and felt something unclench in my chest. For the first time since that fateful party, hope had a shape. I opened my notebook and wrote, "An ally has appeared and I'm not fighting alone this time. Lorraine, witness. Naomi, investigator." The counterstrike now has form. That night, strong wind swept over the roof, and the scrape of dry leaves along the porch sounded like someone whispering outside. I turned off the lights and stood by the window looking out at the yard. The black pines were still in the dark, rain glittering under the street lamp. I remembered Kendra's face at the tea, the calculating eyes behind mascara, the voice smooth as honey laced with poison. There was a time I tried to love her, for Daniel's sake. I once believed that if you were generous enough, people would change. But some people, the more you forgive them, the more they think they're entitled to betray you. Now I have no room for that softness. I'll let justice speak for me. Before bed, I pulled up the camera feeds. The side porch angle showed Lorraine's old car as she left, her figure small but steady in the rain. A warmth crept into me, a feeling I thought I'd lost long ago. Trust. I turned off the screen, set the leather notebook by the bed, and murmured, "Thank you, Lorraine." We'll end this on the terms of women who were underestimated but know how to rise. Outside, the rain kept falling, each drop on the tile roof like a drumbeat for a new battle. And inside me, fear gave way to the calm of someone ready to land the first strike. The next morning I called Daniel, my voice slightly shaky like a tired mother. "Do you have time at lunch? I want to eat with you, at the old place." The old place was the Pine House, the little restaurant by the lake where Daniel took me to dinner after college graduation. Back then, he was a gentle boy with bright eyes and big dreams. I wanted to see that version of him again, or at least make him believe I still did. The restaurant hadn't changed. Oak tables, old landscape paintings on the walls, the scent of mushroom soup in the air. Daniel arrived on time in a gray shirt and brown leather jacket, trying to mask the fatigue the dark circles gave away. "You called so suddenly, I got worried," he said, a mix of care and caution in his voice. I smiled lightly. "It's nothing, I just rethought a few things. Maybe you're right. I need rest. I can't live alone forever." His eyes lifted, a flicker of hope. "You mean you're considering Cedar Ridge?" I nodded, sipping tea. "Yes, I looked at a few photos. It seems peaceful. Maybe I need a place like that to be quiet." Daniel brightened. "I knew it. It's great there, Mom. I have a friend who consulted for them, very professional. Let me send you their website." He pulled out his phone, tapped fast, then sent me the link to Cedar Ridge Retirement Residence. The lead image was a green lawn, smiling seniors by a lake, a piece so perfect it felt fake. "I can help with the paperwork," Daniel said, energized. "Just a few forms." "You won't have to worry." I gave a practiced smile and laid my hand on his wrist like a moved mother. "You really are a devoted son. I just worry the paperwork's fussy. Maybe I need someone younger to handle it." Daniel jumped at it. "Then let me take care of it." By late afternoon, as the light faded, Daniel and Kendra showed up at my door holding a file nearly 2 inches thick in a brown leather cover. They said they'd just come from a senior placement consulting office. Kendra smiled, playing the part of a helpful daughter-in-law guiding a confused elder. "I brought everything for you to sign now, so Cedar Ridge can process it tomorrow. You only need to fill a few spots." I led them to the living room. They opened the stack on the sofa. There were forms for admission, medical care commitments, insurance, and a thick document clipped separately. I glanced at the first page and saw the bold header, Power of Attorney, POA. I looked up at Daniel and asked slowly, "What's this?" "I've never heard Cedar Ridge requiring this." He answered fast, like he'd rehearsed, "Oh, it's just for convenience. If you're there and need someone to manage your bank accounts or handle medical bills, I can do it for you. You won't have to deal with it." I turned to page 2. My eyes stopped on a bolded paragraph. The agent may access, manage, transfer, execute, or alter any financial accounts, investments, real property, or inherited assets of the principal. I looked up with a thin smile. "Son, this looks like everything I own would fall under your control." Kendra jumped in, syrupy voice over ice. "Not exactly, Mom. It's just to reassure Cedar Ridge. Seniors there usually have a POA for their kids to avoid headaches later. You should let someone younger help." I smiled gently, as if flustered. "I understand, but I'm a little worried. If I change my mind one day, could you give the authority back?" Daniel paused half a beat, then nodded quickly. "Of course, Mom. We only want to help. You don't think we want anything else, do you?" The question sounded light, but his eyes tightened. I tilted my head, set the file on the table, and feigned thought. "Let me read every section carefully. I just want to be sure everything's proper. You know I've worked hundreds of contracts. The habit of reading closely is hard to shake." Kendra's smile pinched. "Of course. But Cedar Ridge fills up fast, so sooner is better." "I'll review it tonight and call you tomorrow," I said, soft but firm. They exchanged a worried look, then stood reluctantly. At the door, Kendra kept smiling. "I know you'll love Cedar Ridge. The lake is beautiful." "Good," I said. "Tomorrow I'll see exactly how deep that lake is." As the door clicked shut, I went straight to my office, plugged in my phone, and dialed Thomas Keegan. He answered almost instantly. "Miriam? What's going on?" I laid it out cleanly, every detail of the file, the POA, how Daniel spoke, and especially Kendra's manner. Thomas was quiet for a few seconds, then spoke slowly. "They're playing their final card, Miriam. If you sign, they can move your assets out of your control in a few hours." "I know. But I need to run this game with their own piece." "What do you have in mind?" "I want you to draft a dummy POA, identical in look to the real one, with one small change, legal value of $1, and authority limited to symbolic scope." "I'll sign it in front of them." Thomas let out a short laugh, admiring and worried at once. "You're staging a very risky play. I've spent a lifetime in others' plays. It's time I direct one." After hanging up, I looked at the thick file on the table. The leather still carried Kendra's perfume, the scent now cloying and dangerous. I put on gloves, photographed every page, every signature block, every footnote, then sealed the copies in an envelope for Naomi Pierce in the morning. Outside, the drizzle blurred the streetlights. I turned on the desk lamp and sat in the quiet, cold, and clear-headed. No room for feelings now, only moves. Before bed, I opened my notebook and wrote a single firm line. "They think I'm prey. But Cedar Ridge will be the lure, and the power of attorney the trap." I closed the book, turned off the light, and let the house sink into dark stillness. Only the steady rain on the porch remained like a countdown to a counterstrike taking shape. 2 days later, at 7 a.m., my inbox pinged. From Naomi Pierce. Subject: Financial Report. Urgent Blake Investigation. I slid my glasses up and opened the attachment. Inside was a 14-page report, typed down to the penny, the bold first line reading, "Financial condition and suspicious asset behavior, Daniel and Kendra Blake." I read slowly, line by line. The farther I went, the colder I felt. The Westfield house has been refinanced 3 times in 4 years. Current credit card debt, $82,400. Available bank balance, $1,120. I stopped at the underlined section. On August 14th, Kendra Blake took out a life insurance policy worth $500,000. Insured, Miriam Blake. Sole beneficiary, Kendra Blake. My hand clenched the desk edge. The room tilted for a second. Kendra had gone that far, $500,000 on my death. Below, Naomi had added, recurring payments found to Dr. Calvin Rooker, geriatric psychiatrist, previously accused of diagnosing on demand in the Langmore inheritance case in 2018. Payer, Daniel Blake. I leaned back and let out a dry laugh. I understood everything. They didn't just want me out of my home. They wanted me declared incompetent, legally controlled, then gone quietly. That afternoon, I took a printed copy to Thomas Keegan's office. He read in silence, tapping the pen tip on the desk. When he finished, he took off his glasses and exhaled. "I've seen this play," Thomas said, voice heavy. "Move the elder into a facility, use a sham diagnosis to get court-appointed guardianship. Once that paper's signed, you're done. They can sell the house, empty the accounts, even raid the trust before you can react." I sat quiet. The curtains stirred in a draft. "Thomas," I said softly, "you asked if I was scared. Here's my answer. I'm scared, if I do nothing." He looked up, eyes firm. "Then what's the plan?" I set the report on the desk, my finger landing on Dr. Rooker's name. "They'll be here tomorrow morning with the contracts and the POA. I'll let them think I'm trapped. But in truth," I met Thomas's eyes, "they'll be signing my trap." A slow smile spread across his face. "I should be present to witness this, shouldn't I?" "Of course, and I want one more person, someone who can officially verify everything." "Who are you thinking?" "Inspector Ava Nolan," I said. "She worked the Lakeport estate fraud case. She covers this area now." Thomas nodded immediately. "I'll call her. If the champagne bottle is still preserved, this is the moment to test it." That night, the house felt unusually quiet. Pine resin scented the hall. I opened the fridge and took out the champagne bottle still wrapped in plastic since the party. A thin sweat of condensation coated the glass, seals unbroken. I set it on the table and stared. All these days, this mute thing had been a silent witness. Tomorrow, it would speak. At exactly 8 p.m., Thomas texted, "Ava confirmed. She'll be there in the morning. Everything's ready." I replied simply, "Good. 9 o'clock they'll arrive. I'll invite them to sign." Then I set the phone down and lit a small candle. The wavering flame washed the notebook page where I wrote, "Cedar Ridge, the sweet bait. Dr. Rooker, a knife hidden in a white coat. But tomorrow morning Justice will wear a real lab coat." That night I didn't sleep. I made coffee, turned on the desk lamp, and read Naomi's report page by page. Every number, every transaction was a well-sharpened blade, and now I knew exactly where it was aimed. Naomi had attached 2 blurry photos, one of Kendra meeting a silver-haired man in glasses at a cafe near the hospital, Dr. Rooker. The second was a transfer receipt, $2,500 sent by Daniel to Rooker's account, note line, "Consultation retainer." I remembered Thomas's words, "They're writing your obituary in advance." "Miriam," I answered softly. "Then I'll make them read it first." At dawn I put on a light gray suit, tied back my silver hair, and wore the pearl strand Graham, my husband, once gave me. I didn't want to look like a victim. I wanted to look like the owner of the biggest deal of my life. At 8:30 my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "We're on the way. Bringing the contracts so you can sign." I smiled and replied, "Good, I've made coffee. See you at 9. Right after I texted Thomas, "Arrive 10 minutes early. Back doors open. And to Ava Nolan, need to test the bottle and witness the transaction. 9 o'clock sharp." Both answered, "Understood." Before 9 to 10, I reset the living room table. 2 cups of coffee, and the dummy POA packet, Thomas had prepared a perfect twin of the real contract with one tiny change. In the legal value section, he'd neatly inserted symbolic agreement in the amount of $1 dollar, void for any financial transactions exceeding personal limits. I set that file on the table next to the neatly wrapped champagne bottle. Looking at the scene, I couldn't help remembering the night of the fateful party where it all began with a glass of wine. Only this time, I was the one pouring. Outside, a car approached. A moment later, the doorbell rang. On the camera, Daniel and Kendra stood there, well-dressed, faces stretched between eagerness and fear. I took a breath, straightened my collar, and whispered to myself, "It's time." They think they're winning, but this morning, history will record who wrote the script. I opened the door with a gentle smile. "Come in, you two." "I'm ready." At exactly 9 a.m. My house was flooded with morning light. Sunbeams slid across the oak table where the Cedar Ridge packet sat neat and tidy. Fresh coffee mingled with the pine scent, making the scene look peaceful to the point of fake. Daniel and Kendra sat across from me. Daniel held a pen, his hand trembling slightly. Kendra opened her laptop, typing nonstop, glancing up to smile now and then. "Mom, are you sure you want to do this today?" Daniel asked, voice rough with nerves. I smiled, light as air. "The sooner the better, honey. I'm tired. Let's say I trust you and want you to handle all the fussy paperwork." Kendra shot Daniel a bright look. "See, I told you. Mom needs rest, and Cedar Ridge is perfect." I slid the packet toward them. "Here, I've signed everything. The power of attorney too notarized this morning." Daniel looked at me, genuinely moved in a way that felt fake. "Mom, thank you. I promise I'll take good care of you." He pressed pen to paper and signed the acknowledgement. The ink ran smooth, his handwriting shaky. Kendra immediately entered the info, murmuring account numbers. I caught the corner of her mouth lift, the kind of smile you only see on people who think they've already won. I took a sip of coffee and said evenly, "Oh, by the way, my lawyer is stopping by to confirm some tax forms. Won't take long." Kendra kept smiling, unfazed. Even better, things go faster when someone can verify. The doorbell chimed ding-dong just as I set down my cup. I glanced at the wall clock. 9:07 a.m. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. Inspector Ava Nolan was there with two uniformed officers, nameplates flashing in the sunday. In her hand were a sealed manila envelope and a clear evidence pouch. "Good morning, Mrs. Blake," Ava said, calm and firm. "We have the county tox lab results." I nodded. "Please come in." "This is the right time." She stepped into the living room with the two officers behind her. Daniel jumped to his feet. Kendra froze, fingers snapping her laptop shut. "What's going on?" Daniel asked, his voice shaking. Is there a problem?" Ava opened the envelope and pulled out a report. "We tested the champagne Mrs. Blake provided. Results confirm the presence of oleander extract, nerve toxic, potentially rapidly fatal." The air thickened. I could hear my heartbeat and the wall clock counting off long seconds. Ava continued, voice steady. "Notably, among the glasses recovered, the chipped one identified by Mrs. Blake as hers contained the highest concentration. 4 times the level found in the remaining wine." Daniel's eyes bulged, his face going ashen. Kendra went rigid, hands knotted in her lap. I stood and spoke low, each word clear. I saw her pour a clear liquid from a small amber bottle into that glass before the party started. And when I feigned turning away, she thought no one noticed. Ava glanced at me and gave a slight nod. She took out another sheet and held it up to Kendra. "This is a copy of a life insurance policy for $500,000 on Mrs. Miriam Blake, sole beneficiary Miss Kendra Blake. Policy dated 3 weeks before the incident." Kendra's face drained white. She stammered, It was for safety, I didn't, Ava cut in firm. Miss Kendra Blake, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used as evidence in court. The two officers stepped forward. One read the advisement. You're under arrest for attempted premeditated murder and elder abuse. Please stand and place your hands behind your back. Kendra sprang up, screaming, No, this is a setup. I didn't do anything. Daniel, say something. Daniel sat paralyzed, staring at his wife, then at me. Mom, he whispered, as if he couldn't believe it. You knew. All of it? I looked straight at him, my voice soft but steel-hard. From the very first second, son. The officers cuffed Kendra and led her down the hall. Her golden hair hung limp, her face twisted with tears and fear. Her heels struck the marble cold, hard echoes on the same floor where another woman had collapsed from a poisoned drink. Just before the door, Kendra whipped around, shrieking like she'd lost her mind. You'll pay for this, Miriam, I swear. The door slammed, cutting off everything. Silence fell. Morning light still spilled through the window, but it no longer felt clean. It lit Daniel's face and laid bare the collapse. He sank onto the sofa, head in his hands, voice breaking. Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you let it go this far? I sat across from him, my eyes gentler. Son, if I'd said it early, who would have believed me? The police? Or you, the man who still thought his wife was perfect? Daniel said nothing. I went on. Do you know why I switched the glasses? Because in that split second when I saw Kendra's eyes, I knew that woman wasn't the person I once trusted to marry my son. She looked at me like a number on a balance sheet. And you let her lead you. Tears fell. Daniel bowed his head. I was stupid. No, just blind, I said softly. Luckily, justice isn't. Ava stepped closer and laid a hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Blake, thank you for staying steady and cooperating. The bottle you preserved is key. Because of it, we could arrest Kendra today. I nodded with a small smile. Thank you, Inspector Nolan, and send my thanks to Naomi, the woman brave enough to bring light to the dark. Ava smiled back. We'll keep digging into Dr. Rooker. He'll have to answer for those diagnoses for hire. Let the law do its part, I said. My part is forgiveness, but not forgetting. When they left, it was just Daniel and me. I walked to the window. Outside, the early breeze moved through the pines. The leaves whispering like grateful spirits finally cleared. Daniel came closer and spoke quietly. Mom, I'm sorry. I let her hurt you. I don't deserve. I turned and set my hand on his shoulder. You're still my son, but from today on, you have to find yourself again not with money, but with character. He nodded, eyes red. I looked at the table where the dummy POA still lay, the paper edge catching the sundae. I picked it up, tore it slowly, and fed it to the fireplace. Flames rose, bright and clean. We don't need papers to bind family, I said softly. If someone needs a document to love, love was never what they wanted. Outside, the patrol cars faded into the distance, carrying off the morning chill. I poured another cup of coffee and watched the fire settle. In the bottom of the cup, the dark brown swirled into a spiral like my life, pulled into a vortex of betrayal, yet still finding a way out. I exhaled and closed my eyes. A dark chapter had shut, and in the quiet, I heard my own voice whisper, They thought they could bury me with a scheme. But I'm still here, clear-eyed, free, and alive to tell my own story. After the police left, the house fell into a suffocating, heavy stillness. Outside, the patrol sirens thinned into the wind. Morning light spread across the floor, like a thin fog, and reflected onto Daniel's face, stunned, pale, wet with tears. He collapsed onto the sofa, hands over his head, shaking like someone waking from a nightmare. Mom, he said softly, voice choking. I didn't know. I thought it was just to scare you into signing. I didn't think she'd really try to kill you." I stood a few steps away, looking at the son I once trusted completely. Old memories, the boy running through the yard, the young man holding me after his father died, flashed and evaporated like smoke. "Did you know what she was doing?" I asked, calm and cold. Daniel didn't answer. I stepped closer and held out my hand. "Give me your phone." He hesitated. I looked into his eyes and said, gentle but final, "Do you want to make it right or hide more?" At last, Daniel pulled the phone from his pocket and set it on the table. I picked it up. His fingerprint unlocked the screen. In the messaging app, dozens of conversations between him and Kendra popped up. I skimmed quickly and stopped at a thread near the time of the party. "Kendra, after tonight, your mom will have to beg us." Daniel, "Don't go too far." Kendra, "Sometimes, to get freedom, someone has to sleep deep for a bit." Daniel, "I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want Mom to understand I need some control too." When I finished reading, my heart clenched, but my face didn't change. "What do you think scare means, Daniel? Pouring poison into your mother's wine and calling it scaring her?" He bent over, tears falling onto his hands. "I was stupid. I believed her. She said she only wanted to scare you, so you'd hand over control of the money. She said you were too strict, never giving me a chance to do anything." I was silent for a moment, then pulled the file on the table and set it in front of him. "This is Naomi Pierce's report. Everything's in there: mortgage stacking, credit card debt, and shady spending. Which part do you want to see first?" His hands trembled as he turned the pages. When he reached payments to Dr. Calvin Rooker, his eyes went wide. "She really paid Rooker?" I nodded. "Yes. And Rooker is a geriatric psychiatrist. She hired him to certify that I'm legally incapacitated. Then you, as heir and agent, would have full control of my assets. All of it: accounts, real estate, shares, and the trust money." Daniel clutched his head, his voice breaking. "My God. She said if a doctor signed off that you showed signs of dementia, the court would do the rest. She said, 'You're old, no one would believe you anymore.'" I spoke softly, voice steady and steel cold. "You just signed a power of attorney this morning, remember? Do you know why I didn't object?" He looked up, eyes wet. You actually signed it?" I smiled, slowly opened the drawer, and took out the dummy POA Thomas had drafted. Thick paper, fresh ink. I set it before him and tapped the tiny line at the bottom: symbolic agreement in the amount of $1. Not valid for financial transactions exceeding personal limits. Daniel read it, shock spreading across his face. "My God, you tricked us." "No," I said quietly. "I just played the victim so they'd expose themselves. You're the one who signed, and that signature is evidence for the police." He slumped, voice choked. I let her control me. "Mom, I'm sorry." I rested my hand on his shoulder, though my hand was still cold. "Son, blind love is a hard illness to cure. But unlike her, you still have a conscience, otherwise you wouldn't be crying today." He looked up, eyes wet. "What do you want me to do now?" "Take responsibility," I said. "By telling the truth. I pulled out my new will and the notarized trust documents. This is the final clause I added after working with Thomas." I pointed to the italic line. "In the event any individual attempts to prove I am legally incapacitated in order to seize control of my assets, the entire estate shall immediately transfer to charitable organizations and medical research funds." Daniel went still. His eyes stayed on that line a long time, as if reading his own sentence. "Mom, you've ruined my life," he whispered, almost shouting. "I'll have nothing left." I looked at him, voice low and slow. "No, Daniel, you ruined it yourself. I only stopped you from ruining me." The room was silent, only the wind at the window and the clock ticking. Daniel stared at the floor, tears wouldn't stop. I just wanted you to trust me again. I'm tired of you always being in control. Kendra was right, you never saw me as an adult. I sat and sighed. Maybe that's true. I always thought you needed protecting, like the 5-year-old who got lost at the mall. I didn't realize that by protecting you too much, I made you believe I was the enemy. He looked at me, lips trembling. Do you still forgive me? I didn't answer right away. I stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the pines in the distance. Late sun broke through thin clouds and reflected on the glass. Forgiveness, I whispered, is a gift I only give to those who can save themselves. Prove you deserve it. Daniel bowed his head and nodded. I'll cooperate with the police. Tell them everything. About Kendra, about Rooker. All of it. I turned back and smiled faintly, not bitter, just the smile of someone who has lived through too much loss. That's the only way you start over. That afternoon, Thomas Keegan arrived. He brought new papers to formalize Daniel's statement. When I handed him the dummy POA, he smiled, a trace of respect in his eyes. I told you, Miriam, you don't need to fear a confrontation, and clearly, you never did. I gave a small laugh and looked toward the window where sunlight poured into the room that had just witnessed the unvarnished truth. No, Thomas. I do know fear. I'm afraid of dying before I get to look straight at the real faces of the people I love. After Thomas left, I sat across from Daniel again. Between us, no more files, no more hiding, just two people, a mother and a son, and what was left after the storm. Daniel said softly, I'll leave town after I finish with the police. I need time to become myself again. I nodded. I hope so, and when you're ready, this door is still open. He looked around the house, eyes red. This used to be a home. I turned it into a battlefield. I took his hand, my voice gentler. Any battlefield can become peaceful again, Daniel. If the survivor learns to love without possession. When he left, I watched from the window. His shadow stretched across the wet grass path, fading into the midday light. I knew I'd just lost something, but I'd also reclaimed something more important, the truth. I opened my notebook and wrote the morning's last line. Those who thought they could deceive me didn't know their own lies would light up every dark corner. Today, the final mask fell. I closed the notebook and looked at the pines. The leaves trembled in the wind like a whisper from nature that justice, though slow, always arrives on time. 3 months later, fall had touched my small town with deep red leaves. The air carried a gentle chill, tinged with damp wood and leftover rain. But in my heart was another kind of cold, the cold of loss and endings. On sentencing day, I sat in the second row of the Fairfield County courtroom. It wasn't large, but it was packed. Reporters, neighbors, and strangers come out of curiosity. Camera shutters popped. On the big screen hung in the courtroom, the headline was clear. The Champagne poison case, my name, Miriam Blake, appeared beside it. Under that line was Kendra being led in hair messy, eyes empty, her old pride gone. When the judge read the sentence, his voice was even, emotionless. Kendra Blake, the court sentences you to 15 years in prison for attempted premeditated murder and elder abuse. Daniel Blake, accessory, 3 years in prison for conspiracy and willful concealment of a crime. The gavel hit the block like the sound of the past splintering. I sat motionless, not happy, not vindicated. Just a deep tiredness seeping through my bones. 30 years of motherhood, raising a child, teaching him decency, and in the end, I watched him leave court in handcuffs. Reporters rushed in, microphones up. Mrs. Blake, do you have anything to say about the verdict? I answered briefly, justice has done its part. The rest only time can heal. Then I walked out quietly. No one saw me shake. But the hand in my coat pocket was soaked with sweat. That afternoon I got a call, a clear, trembling voice on the other end. Grandma, it's Emma. I know everything now. I'm sorry I didn't know. If I had known, I would have said something. I swear. I closed my eyes. Emma, my 16-year-old granddaughter, the last light in my family. I held the phone and listened to her voice break into sobs. I wanted to say something comforting, but my throat locked. Only when I heard the tiny, "I still love you, Grandma," did my tears finally burn hot. "I love you too, Emma," I said. "It's not your fault. Don't ever think that." The call lasted only minutes, but to me it felt like a lifetime. When it ended, I sat still a long time, watching golden light slant across the wooden table. In that moment, I understood. Any nightmare, if told, can become a warning. In the days after, I started seeing Lorraine, Kendra's mother, again. She was thinner, grayer, but her voice was still soft as spring wind. We sat in a small corner cafe where light poured through the window onto two faces lined by years. Lorraine stirred her tea, voice low and sad. "I still can't believe. My own daughter did that." I looked at her, my eyes softening. I couldn't believe it either. "But the truth doesn't need our belief, it exists anyway." She gave a sad smile. "Sometimes I think, if only I'd taught her to know enough. To stop. Maybe it would have been different." I answered gently. "A mother's love can't save someone who chooses the dark, Lorraine. But it can save others, if we have the courage to tell the story." She looked at me, eyes brightening. "I want to write it all down. A book about financial abuse of the elderly, how family can turn into predators. Will you do it with me?" I smiled and nodded. If our story can help someone avoid a tragedy, then this pain isn't meaningless. Time passed. The town felt calm again, as if no scandal had ever happened. But every morning when I stepped into the rose garden, I still heard echoes of the past. The red roses Graham planted now bloomed bright, their scent strong, as if they knew I'd taken back my freedom, not just for me, but for those like me. I often sat beneath the pergola, breeze sifting through the leaves, with the old notebook that had followed me through this whole journey. Inside I wrote, "3 months have passed. Justice arrived late, but it arrived. Daniel is learning to face what he did. Kendra will have enough years to grasp the price of greed. And me, I'm learning to live again, not to get revenge, but to tell." One morning, Lorraine called, her voice happier than usual. "I just signed with a small publisher. The book will be called Broken Trusts: When Family Turns Against You." I smiled into the phone. Good title. In the end, trust is the most fragile thing, isn't it? "Yes," she said. "But also the strongest when we put it in the right place." That afternoon, I walked to the back garden. Sunset washed each petal in pink. I touched a new rosebud and thought of Emma. She emails me every week, telling me about school and friends, always ending with, "I'm studying law, Grandma. I want to protect people like you." Each time I read it, warmth spreads through me. I realized motherhood can fail in one generation, but if we have the courage to keep loving, it can be redeemed in the next. In the evening, I sat in the living room and looked up at an old family photo. Me, Daniel, Kendra, and little Emma. We were all smiling, summer sunlight pouring through the window behind us. I whispered to myself, sometimes life doesn't let us choose the ending, but we can choose how to tell it. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind on the porch. In that sound, I seemed to hear Graham's voice somewhere. "You're strong now, Miriam. Keep living, not to remember, but to light the way." I opened my eyes, drew a deep breath. Then I smiled. Before going to bed, I wrote the last lines in my journal. I don't regret protecting myself. I only regret that, to live, I had to lose the one who once called me Mom. But maybe survival is the only way a mother keeps loving through scars. I set down the pen and blew out the candle, leaving the scent of wax and roses hanging in the air. Outside, the night sky was crystal clear. The stars glittered like Emma's eyes, like Graham's, and like all the souls who walked through darkness and still chose the light. I smiled to myself. No darkness is permanent, only those who refused to open their eyes. And so, in the house that had seen scheming, tears, and justice, I turned off the lights and left one thing still shining: the belief that my story, once told, will save someone else. One March morning, Thomas Keegan called. His voice came warm and relieved through the phone. "Miriam, I've got good news. The insurance company voided Kendra's policy and refunded all the premiums. And one more thing. The bank just foreclosed on the house in Westfield where Daniel used to live. They couldn't keep it." I closed my eyes and took a long breath, not from joy, but because the last knot had finally untied. "So it's done, Thomas?" I asked. "It's done," he said, steady. "Your trust is finalized too. I added the special clause you requested. If anyone tries to declare you legally incapacitated, the entire estate immediately transfers to charities. No one can touch a single cent." I gave a small laugh. Ironic, isn't it? They thought they could steal assets with legal tricks, and the law is exactly what protects me. Thomas chuckled. "Justice sides with the clear-minded, Miriam. You're living proof." Now my life has settled back into peace. The old house is updated, with a private security system and 2 guards rotating shifts. Every month, Thomas and his legal team review all my accounts and investments. I don't worry about money anymore. I just live and breathe the air of free days. In the mornings, I sit by the window, listen to sparrows chattering on the eaves, and drink coffee from the porcelain cup Graham bought on our first trip together. Each time the roasted aroma rises, it reminds me, every loss can be mended by awakening. That afternoon, I got a message from Emma. My phone lit up, the little line clear on the screen. "Grandma, I got into Northwestern University's law program. I did it just like you dreamed." I laughed and tears slipped out before I knew it. "That girl," I whispered. "She chose the light in a story full of shadows." I texted back, "I'm proud of you. Learn to use the law to protect the vulnerable, not to condemn, but to guide." Watching the message send, I felt light as a crane. Maybe that's the real meaning of justice, not only punishing the wicked, but planting good for the next generation. That evening, I went to the garden. Dusk fell softly on the rows of roses Graham had planted. After a long winter, they were in full bloom, crimson, proud and alive. I walked slowly past each bed, my hand brushing petals soft as velvet. To me, every rose is a witness. They stood there when I was betrayed, when I won back justice, and now when I chose forgiveness. I sat on the wooden bench in the garden and watched the sky turn purple. Crickets chirped in the distance, mixed with the earthy scent of damp soil. I smiled softly and spoke as if to myself, "I'm telling this story not to stir up hate, but to remind you, being old doesn't mean being powerless. We can still stand up, fight, and protect ourselves with our wits, our courage, and the truth." I looked up at the night sky. Stars began to appear, glittering in the stillness. In that moment, I seemed to hear Graham whisper, "You did the right thing, Miriam. You survived not by luck, but because you never let go of yourself." I smiled and answered softly, "I know. And I'll keep living not for the past, but for those who need to hear this story. I've walked through fear, loss, and betrayal to learn one thing. Age doesn't make us weaker, it makes us clearer." If you're listening to me now, maybe you've been dismissed, hurt, or pushed aside just because you're a little older. But remember, we're not useless. We simply have more experience than the ones who tried to bring us down. Today, I want to thank you for taking the time to walk through this journey with me. Thank you for staying with me through each pain, each ray of hope, and each time I stood back up. If my story touched your heart, leave a comment, tell me where you are, and whether you've lived something similar. I want to know that strong people are never alone. And if you believe in justice, in the light, in human renewal, please hit like, subscribe, and come back for the next stories. Because sometimes a single story told, a single shared word, can save another life. I just carved your car to shreds. That piece of junk suits you better than anything else. I froze in the kitchen, my hand gripping the phone until my knuckles went white. My daughter-in-law's voice was sweet but poisonous, like a snake bite. For 3 years I gave her a roof, meals, and called her my daughter. And this is how she repays me. I took a deep breath and kept my tone even. "Honey, I sold that silver Nissan 3 months ago," she snapped. "Sold it to who?" I answered gently. "To a retired state police colonel. The kind who never lets property damage slide." Heavy silence fell. Then sirens wailed. I set the phone down and smiled faintly. "Truth is, sweetheart, I'm done being afraid of losing anything. Now it's your turn to learn how to lose." But before the police knocked on my daughter-in-law's door, let me tell you how a 62-year-old woman who was looked down on learned to strike back with brains and dignity. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Marilyn Cooper, 62, living alone in a quiet suburb of Savannah, Georgia. My 2-story wooden house sits between tall pines and a bougainvillea trellis off the porch. I've been here 38 years since my husband Frank was alive. We built each step, painted each plank, and planted lavender along the little walk. 7 years since he passed, I've kept everything the same as if he just stepped out for a morning coffee. Frank used to say, "This house is where you belong, Marilyn," and I believed it until Brielle walked into our lives. 3 years ago, my only son Lucas brought Brielle over to meet me. I still remember that soft, sunny afternoon, the kitchen smelling of apple pie. She showed up in a navy dress, bright smile, and lively eyes. "Mom, Marilyn, Lucas says you make the best chicken pot pie in Savannah," she said, sweet enough to soften my heart. For the first time in years, my home filled with laughter. She helped set the table, asked about the past, and praised the complete old wedding photo of me and Frank. I watched Lucas smile, and relief washed over me. A widowed mother can't ask for more than to see her child loved. Just 6 months later, they announced their engagement. Lucas said they wanted a small outdoor wedding, but when I saw Brielle flipping through bridal magazines with white gowns costing thousands of dollars, I knew it wouldn't be small at all. I withdrew a large chunk of my retirement savings, the money Frank and I had planned to use to redo the porch to give my son his dream wedding. I told myself it was the last gift from his father, delivered through me. The wedding was on a brilliant May day. In the golden sunlight, I watched Lucas and Brielle exchange vows, tears streaming down my face. I was proud, happy, and a little empty. When they left for a honeymoon in Charleston, I wrapped a small gift, our wedding photo, and a handwritten card. Marriage isn't finding a perfect person. It's learning to love on imperfect days. I didn't know that, a few months later. That saying would twist back like a knife into my own heart. After they returned, things started to change. Brielle often looked around my house with an appraiser's eye, like she was scouting a property waiting for a flip. "Have you ever thought about selling these old things? The curtains are dated, and the wood floors are all scratched," she said with a light laugh. I answered, "They're as old as I am, but as solid as day one." Brielle shrugged. "I just think you should live simpler. This house is too big for just you." That sentence might have sounded harmless, but the look in her eyes chilled me. From then on, the visits tapered off. She always had excuses, busy with a project, on a work trip, and Lucas stayed stuck in the middle, awkward and evasive. Each time she came by, she brought a new idea. If we lived closer to downtown, it'd be better for work. "Maybe let us stay with you for a while to save on rent." I smiled and deflected. "I'm used to the quiet. Probably not a good match for young people's pace." Brielle gave a thin smile. "Sure, I get it. Keeping such a big house all to yourself must be lonely." I realized that behind the concern was ambition dressed up as politeness. Lucas started to change. The boy who used to call every morning to ask, "Mom, did you have breakfast?" now replied to texts with a few clipped words. I felt the gap widen not between generations, but between love and scheming. One afternoon, my neighbor, Mrs. Dolores King, knocked. She spoke softly. "Marilyn, I've seen your daughter-in-law taking pictures of your house several times. Inside, and the address numbers too." I just stood still, my heart thudding. I began to write down every detail: the day Brielle asked about the deed, when she helped herself to my drawer looking for invoices, the way she watched whenever I opened the safe. I'm not a suspicious person. But a woman who taught classes for 30 years knows this. When someone starts collecting information, they're building a plan. Then came Lucas's 30th birthday. When I came back from the market, the front door was wide open and music was blaring. I walked in and went cold. In the living room, a big buffet table with food, wine glasses, flowers, and strangers laughing. In the middle stood Brielle in a red dress, raising a glass. "Happy birthday to my husband and cheers to our new home." Applause erupted. I stood there holding a bag of limes and herbs. A stranger turned to me. "And you are?" Brielle smiled. "Oh, she's the old tenant who hasn't moved out yet." The room burst into laughter. In that moment, I didn't cry or shout. I set the groceries down, walked straight to my bedroom, and closed the door. The last light of day came through the curtains, falling across Frank's photo. I looked at him for a long time and choked out, I've forgotten who I am, honey." But I haven't. I sat at my desk, opened the old notebook. The first line I wrote, "June 12th, begin the counterattack." From that moment, I wasn't a passive target anymore. I, Marilyn Cooper, would be the one setting the trap. Sunday dinners, once our family tradition, started disappearing like steam after a rain. Before, right at 6, I always set the table, laid out the lace runner Frank picked in New Orleans, and waited for Lucas to knock. Now, it was just me and the ticking wall clock. "This week, Brielle and I already have plans with friends, Mom." "Next week for sure," Lucas said over the phone, rushed. "Next week, then the week after that." The reasons kept changing: new project, client dinner, Brielle's under the weather. I said nothing more. Just, "Okay, I understand." But the truth is, I understood more than Lucas thought. One evening, while I was steeping chamomile tea, Brielle stopped by alone. She wore a fitted dress, designer bag on her arm, standing in the kitchen doorway like she owned the place. "Have you ever thought about upgrading your living situation?" she asked, friendly yet off. "Upgrading?" I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, the house is a bit old, the floors creak, the walls are damp. If you want, Lucas and I can help. Turn it into a modern place and sell it for a good price. You could move somewhere more convenient, smaller. Wouldn't that be better for you?" I set my cup on the table and looked at her. "This house is good for me. It's my home." Brielle smiled, a smile thin as a blade. "You're really selfish. People want to help and you won't let them. It's a big house and you live here alone. Isn't that wasteful?" That line was like a pin, not because it insulted me, but because there was no respect left in her voice. I didn't answer. I opened the back door to let the breeze in. The scent of pine and lavender pushed out her heavy perfume. Lucas drifted farther. He called less, texted in fragments, even forgot my birthday for the first time in 31 years. When I called, his voice sounded tired. "Mom, I'm slammed. I'm on a new project. Brielle's stressed too. Please don't add pressure on her." "Add pressure?" I let out a short laugh after hanging up. Me, the woman who taught him right from wrong, now labeled emotional burden. One June afternoon, Mrs. Dolores King, my next-door neighbor, came over. She's in her 70s, trims roses, and knows everything on the block. "Marilyn," she said, lowered her voice like sharing a secret. Yesterday I saw your daughter-in-law in your yard, taking pictures. A lot. The front, the windows. I jolted. When? Around noon. You were out. I thought maybe you asked her to take photos to list the house. But I don't think so. That line made my blood run cold. I smiled my thanks, but inside, a storm rose. That night, I opened my notebook and started logging everything. June 18th, Brielle photographed the house while I was out. June 20th, asked Lucas, he said, probably for a design project. June 23rd, Brielle called me stubborn for refusing to talk about future housing. Each shaky line under the lamp was a small piece of evidence for a truth I didn't want to face. They didn't just want to live with me. They wanted to own it all. The next Saturday, I invited them over for dinner, a healing family meal. I made honey-roasted chicken, multigrain bread, and Lucas's favorite dessert, lemon cake with frosting. When they arrived, I could see Lucas's eyes had changed, tired. And Brielle moved through my kitchen like it was hers. I think you should let us stay here for a while. Just a few months, until we find a new place. I looked at her and kept my voice gentle. Your place downtown is better than this. But it's too small, Mom. And this, she swept her eyes. Around the room, spacious, quiet. You wouldn't be alone anymore. Win-win. I set my fork down and looked straight at her. Brielle, sometimes quiet is the only thing a widow has left. The air froze. Lucas stared at his plate. Brielle gave a dry laugh. Or are you afraid of losing control? I answered softly, no, I'm afraid of losing peace. Dinner ended in silence. As they left, I heard Brielle whisper to Lucas at the door, she won't budge, but eventually she will. That night I sat on the sofa under a warm yellow lamp. I missed Frank. If he were here, he'd know how to talk to Lucas. But it was just me. I opened my phone and read an old text from my son. Mom, don't worry, I'm always here. Now, every time I read it, I felt nothing but emptiness. I asked myself, when did gratitude turn into entitlement? When did a mother's help become a debt a child can collect? I started pretending to be frail. Not because I was scared, but because I needed to see what they would do if they thought I wasn't sharp anymore. I forgot to turn off the porch light, asked the same question twice, sometimes called Lucas early just to ask what day it is. Brielle acted annoyed, but her eyes lit up every time I misspoke. Every time I laughed it off as memory getting worse with age. One evening, when Lucas stopped by alone, he looked around and spoke quietly. Mom, I'm worried about you. Maybe you should think about moving somewhere more convenient. With care, Brielle knows some great centers. I looked at my son, my heart tightening. Son, my body's older, not my backbone. And I still remember everything, especially when people want me to forget. Lucas fell silent. I knew he understood who I meant. The next day, while I was sweeping the porch, Mrs. Dolores came again, speaking low. They came this morning while you were at the store. Walked around the house, measuring things. I saw Brielle holding a notebook, and Lucas taking pictures of the fence. I set the broom down and looked toward their place across the street. A window curtain shifted, someone was watching back. In that moment, I knew the fight had begun. It wasn't about a house or assets anymore. It was about trust, honor, and the dignity of a mother who gave her life to her family. I went inside, locked the door, and stood in the stillness. A breeze touched our wedding photo. The wooden frame swayed lightly as if reminding me, Marilyn, you may be older, but you don't bow. I looked around the room, the scuffed floorboards, the old chairs, and felt strength rise. Not anger, resolve. I pulled the notebook close, flipped to a new page, and wrote clearly, July 2nd they want to take. I'll let them think they're about to win. I set the pen down, closed my eyes, and whispered, Frank, I'm not alone anymore. This battle I'll fight with both our minds. And in that old wooden house on a quiet street, a 62-year-old woman began preparing for the first counterattack of her life. When Mrs. Joanne Patel called, her voice a little weary, I knew it wasn't simple. Joanne isn't just an old friend, she's the notary I've trusted since my PTA days. She says things straight and doesn't sugarcoat. Marilyn, better sit down for this, she said. Today someone requested a certified copy of your property deed. I nearly dropped the kettle. Who requested it? I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. It's under the last name Collins, first name Brielle Collins. My heart skipped. I know Brielle is my daughter-in-law, but the thought of her pulling the deed to my house through a notary office twisted my insides. I hurried to Joanne's office to hear it and see it with my own eyes. Joanne handed me a photocopy. The ink was faded, the office stamp light. On top was a request for a certified copy of the certificate of ownership for the house at 12 Willow Lane, owner, Marilyn A. Cooper. In the power of attorney section, there was a signature with familiar loops. But it wasn't mine. I compared it to your signature on file, Joanne said. It doesn't match. This is a forged signature. I studied each stroke, then felt my hands go cold. After years of signing budget ledgers, invoices, every kind of paper, I knew the difference. The signature on that form was warped and rushed, like someone signing under pressure. A wave of betrayal hit me. Everything I'd built over a lifetime, and someone tried to copy my name to do harm. Joanne flipped to the next page, her face serious. The requester is listed as Brielle Collins at apartment 4B. They also attached a power of attorney template, apparently to copy or replace the original title documents. I bit my lip, steadying myself. Being conned teaches a harsh lesson. Trust can be exploited, and sometimes the person who hurts you is the one you once loved. I called Maya Brooks right away, my niece who'd come down from New York after hearing what happened. Maya's an attorney patient and sharp. When I told her, she came to my house within half a day, laptop in one hand and a bag stuffed with legal pads in the other. Maya read the request closely, her eyes scanning fast. They're trying to lay the groundwork to declare you legally incapacitated, she said bluntly. This power of attorney form can be used as supporting evidence, especially if they line up a medical note to back it. I sat at the table, numb. The idea of being labeled no longer competent just because of a few lies made me feel voiceless. I raised my son, kept this family going, paid every tuition bill for Lucas. Now someone could pair a forged signature with a doctor's embellishment and take everything? Maya went on. Brielle and Lucas could be working in tandem, one pushing the legal angle, the other using pity to manipulate. If they get a medical dot of the medical go, the result saying you have cognitive decline, a court can appoint a temporary guardian. What does that mean specifically? I asked, my voice shaking. If they persuade enough people that you're not lucid, they can petition the court to appoint a representative to manage your assets, which means they could control your bank accounts, property, even sell the house. You need to act now. Make a new will. Lock down access to your current accounts, and name a trusted person as your emergency agent, but only because you choose it, not because someone forces you. I nodded. Those words touched my fear and opened a way out at the same time. I couldn't let things happen the way they wanted. Maya dug deeper, and a fact came out that took my breath away. She checked public records, and the young couple's total debt was about $180,000, mostly a car loan, credit cards, and a failed investment contract. They have a clear motive to find a big pile of money, Maya said. And this house is the life raft. According to a recent real estate appraisal, my house in Savannah is worth about $850,000. Hearing that number, my chest tightened. It isn't just a dollar amount, it's nearly 40 years of life, of happiness and loss. And to them, that money could wipe out their debt and give them a fresh start by wiping me out. I replayed every detail. Brielle always hinting about upgrading the house, Lucas suddenly taking interest in the utility bills, and the look in her eyes when she walked into my living room, the look of someone pricing a thing. Not loving a home. I understood. If I didn't respond, I would lose everything. Not because they'd snatch it by force, but because they'd make the theft legal by smearing my competence. Maya and I spent hours drawing up a plan. She told me to make a new will, appoint an independent overseer, and spell out, "No one may represent me in any financial transaction without valid medical verification and a court certification. I should also move all my savings into a new account known only to me and Maya. The fewer traces at the old bank, the harder it is for them to access," she said. Then she suggested I record a life estate, meaning I still have full rights to live in and manage the house until I die, no matter what names end up on paperwork later. I'd never heard of it, but the idea made me exhale. "Last thing," Maya said. "We need evidence, not suspicion, something that holds up in court. They've already left traces, the forged signature, notary records, and most importantly, motive. But the heaviest weight is still their own words." I looked at Maya and spoke slowly. "You mean make them confess?" "Exactly. Not by forcing them. Make them think you've gotten weaker, let your guard down. When they feel safe, they'll say everything, and that's when we record it, store it, and have evidence they can't deny." I sat quietly in the living room after Maya left. The last light of day hit the wedding photo of me and Frank, making the glass glint. I brushed the oak frame and whispered, "Honey, I'll keep my promise. I'll protect this home." I knew I couldn't fight with brawn, but I could fight with my mind, the very thing Brielle most underestimated in me. I didn't sleep that night. I opened a small notebook and wrote out each step. Step 1, new will and new accounts. Step 2, record a life estate. Step 3, monitor Brielle and Lucas's actions. Step 4, create chances for them to reveal their true intent. I closed the notebook and slid it into the drawer beneath the hand-embroidered cloth. Next to it was Frank's wedding ring, a reminder that I had once fought to keep our happiness, and I would do it again. Before turning off the light, I whispered into the dark, "They think I'm weak, but this weakness will be the trap." And that night, in the quiet wooden house in Savannah, I began to sketch the first lines of my counterattack. My nephew Tyler Nguyen is a security tech, just 26, quick and discreet. He's the son of my late sister, the little boy who used to play Lego under our coffee table when Frank and I were young. Tyler still calls me Aunt M and keeps the habit of visiting every weekend with a bag of freshly roasted coffee beans. When I told him everything, he didn't look surprised. He just spoke softly, steady. "Bad people always assume older folks can't protect themselves, Aunt Marilyn, but they forget technology can be on the side of what's right, too." 3 days later, Tyler brought a cookie tin. Inside wasn't cookies, but 3 hidden cameras as small as a fingertip disguised as a wall clock, an outlet, and a faux flower vase for the dining table. He checked the wiring and said, "They record audio and video and back up to the cloud. You can watch on your phone, but I suggest you don't. Let them think you know nothing." I nodded. Something cold and slow moved in my breathing as I looked at those tiny devices. Part of me hurt having to use cameras to watch my own family, but another part knew that without this, I'd be erased from my own life. I decided to set the bait myself. One morning, I called Brielle. "Honey, I think I should make a spare key. If I misplace mine, you can help me get in." Brielle sounded more eager than I expected. "Oh, of course, Mom. I'll keep it for you." I took the copy to her. When the key dropped into her palm, I saw that look, the look of someone who just grabbed control. "Now you can relax," she said, smiling thin as a razor. I answered softly, "Yes, I'm very relaxed." As the door closed, I turned away, my chest trembling with anger. But for the first time, my fear had turned into a clear plan. Over the next days, I started acting forgetful. I forgot to turn off the stove, let a pot boil, dry and burn, then called Lucas to check. I told the same story about Frank, how he was out back watering the garden just to watch their reactions. Lucas watched me quietly, his eyes a mix of pity and doubt. Every time I gave a weak laugh or misstated a date, that look sharpened. Brielle, though, started to look pleased. One afternoon, I was reading the paper in the living room. The door clicked and Brielle's heels tapped across the floor. She thought I didn't notice. She circled the room, looked in corners, picked up frames, peeked in a drawer. After she left, I checked my phone. The camera hidden in the vase had it all. Brielle rummaging, opening the drawer with old invoices and a couple of notebooks. I hit save on the clip, feeling both hurt and strangely numb. I'd gotten so used to being wounded that the tears didn't come anymore. 2 weeks later, Lucas came with Brielle. They brought a bag of takeout. Near the end of dinner, I heard Brielle's voice, soft but clear enough for the camera. "Lucas, you need to get Mom in for a neurocheck soon. I don't think she's okay." If a doctor confirms it, the power of attorney gets easier. I sat there quietly, sprinkling salt on the mashed potatoes as if I'd heard nothing. Lucas stayed silent. I didn't know what was in his head, fear, complicity, or just exhaustion. But I knew one thing. The camera heard everything. That night, I took the next step in my plan, moving all the money. I sat at the computer, the screen light on my older face. My hands trembled a bit, but every keystroke was decisive. I moved nearly $280,000 retirement, insurance, and Frank's savings into a new joint account with Maya. I left only a few $100s in the old account, just enough to keep up appearances. When I finished, I leaned back and closed my eyes. It wasn't just a bank transaction, it was pulling power out of the hands trying to seize it. Some might call me cold. They don't know I'm learning how to survive in my own home. What do you think? Do we sometimes have to be that cold to protect what's right? Tell me in the comments. The next day, I met Joanne Patel at her office. On her desk was a stack of papers, the updated will, the life estate recording, and a memo from Maya. Joanne read slowly, every word. Lucas Cooper inherits only if there is no evidence of coercion, deception, or fraudulent conduct related to the property owner. In any other case, inheritance is revoked. I signed, the pen moving slow but firm. This time, no shaking. "Want me to seal the file here?" Joanne asked. "Absolutely. And only open it when I ask, or when Maya is with me." Joanne nodded, stamped the red seal, tucked everything in a sealed envelope, and locked it in the safe. "I'll keep it secure. And Marilyn, you're doing the right thing." I smiled, tired but genuine. "I'm just learning to protect myself." That evening, I stood in the kitchen with the small light on, looking at the house resting under warm yellow. The smell of old wood mixed with cinnamon and coffee, the scent of calmer years. From today on, this house would be protected by something stronger than a deadbolt, the law and preparation. I looked up at the ceiling where the tiny hidden camera glowed a faint red. "Frank," I whispered, "see it? I've set watchful eyes to keep our home. I'm not afraid anymore." Night air slipped through the window frame, carrying crickets and the lavender from the yard. I smiled. Everything was ready. 3 days later, Brielle dropped by. She brought a gift box, said it was pie from your favorite shop. I opened it, a store-bought apple pie, the very thing she knows I'm allergic to. She smiled, fake sweet. "You need to watch what you eat, Mom. At your age, memory goes quick." I looked at her, even tone. "Thanks for the reminder. I'm taking note of that every day." She didn't know that in this very kitchen, 3 cameras were running. Every word, every glance, every stiff smile captured, second by second. That night, sitting alone on the porch, I opened my phone and replayed the day's clip. Brielle's face was sharp on screen, her voice so clear it still tightened my chest. But instead of pain, I felt a strange calm. I'd come too far to turn back, and for the first time in years, I didn't see myself as a victim. I was the one moving the pieces, quiet, patient, fully prepared. I turned off the phone, closed the door, and wrote a single line in my diary. August 20th trap set, eyes open. All that's left is for them to walk in. On an early fall morning, as maple leaves started to drift along Willow Lane, Lucas called me, voice soft but stiff. "Mom, Brielle says you've been forgetful lately. We just want to make sure you're okay. Can you come with me tomorrow to see Dr. Leonard Price? He's a specialist in older adults." I knew exactly what that meant. Specialist in older adults is the polite way to say geriatric psych. I answered lightly, like nothing was amiss. "Of course, honey." I'm curious to see how sharp my memory still is. When I hung up, I texted Maya. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Dr. Price's office. Come with me." A few minutes later, she replied, "I'll be there. Stay calm. Let them show themselves." The next morning, I wore a cream linen dress, hair pinned neat. Before leaving, I touched Frank's photo on the little altar and smiled. Let's see how far they'll take this performance today. Dr. Leonard Price's clinic is on the second floor of an old building downtown. The walls are lined with yellowed certificates and photos of him with older patients' faces smiling but tired. Lucas sat beside me in the waiting room, eyes shifting. Brielle held her purse, tapping her phone, glancing at me now and then. Maya arrived right on time, with a folder and a light smile. Dr. Price stepped out. He's in his 50s, salt and pepper hair, a low voice trying to feel trustworthy. "Mrs. Cooper, come in. Your son and daughter-in-law say you've had some forgetful episodes lately." I smiled. "I've heard them say that too, so I came to see if my memory's really that bad." The exam started with easy questions. "Do you know what day it is today?" "I believe it's Tuesday, September 14th, right?" "Correct. Now please repeat these 3 words. Tree window clock." I nodded and repeated them, then waited. He moved on to simple shapes and asked me to copy them. I finished in a few minutes, neat and accurate. "Doctor." Price nodded, then tried another angle. "Can you tell me those 3 words again from the beginning?" I smiled. "Tree window clock. And can you tell me why there isn't a single real window in your office? I noticed all the light is artificial." He looked briefly rattled, not expecting me to be that observant. Brielle frowned. Lucas stayed quiet, holding her hand. When the test ended, Dr. Price shifted tone. He leaned back and spoke slowly. "Mrs. Cooper, I think you're still lucid. However, at your age, it's wise to plan for emergencies. I suggest you sign a temporary financial power of attorney, so if anything happens, someone can help manage your finances." Before I could speak, Maya cut in. Firm. "Respectfully, Mrs. Cooper is fully competent. There's no medical basis to advise a patient to sign such a document at a first visit. If you want to make a recommendation, please put it in the record with a lawful rationale." Silence. Lucas looked up, frowning. "Maya, it's just a standard precaution. You're overreacting." Maya smiled. "I'm doing my job as counsel to protect my client's legal rights." "Doctor." Price cleared his throat, trying to steady himself. "I'm only suggesting, not forcing anyone." But Brielle wouldn't let go. "Doctor, my mom forgets a lot. She once burned a whole pot, almost set the stove on fire, and she got lost at the grocery store." I turned to her, voice light but sharp. "Brielle, that's a lot of stories. Do you have proof for any of them?" Maya added. "If so, let's put it in the file with evidence, because this claim affects medical records." Brielle flushed and stared down at her phone. Lucas glanced around, clearly uneasy. Dr. Price coughed, trying to regain control. "All right, let's stop here for today. I'll schedule a more in-depth evaluation after I consult with the family. I knew that meant he wanted to stall time to legitimize what they were doing. I just smiled. "Sure, doctor. Do whatever you think you need to do. I'll be fully prepared next time." Outside, the air felt warm and open. I took a deep breath, like stepping out of a room full of schemes. Lucas drove in silence. Brielle sat stone-faced. Maya gazed out the window beside me. Midway, Lucas spoke softly. "Mom, you overreacted." The doctor was trying to help. I looked at my son, calm. "Honey, when someone wants my signature without telling me the consequences, that's not help. That's taking." Lucas gripped the wheel. "You're seeing us wrong. You're reacting like a sick person, Mom. Everyone can see you need supervision." In the rearview mirror, I looked at him, no anger left, just a quiet sadness. "No, honey, I'm not sick. I'm just hurt that you can't tell the difference between concern and manipulation anymore." No one spoke again until the car stopped at my gate. When I got out, Maya stayed a few extra minutes. She took my hand, voice small but steady. "You did great. They're losing control, and that's when mistakes happen. Don't be angry with Lucas. People who get manipulated are usually the ones who trust most. But now we have what we need. Proof they tried to push a power of attorney." I nodded. "Thank you. Today I learned they're not trying. I can't talk anymore, they're trying to win." Maya gave a sad smile. "And when winning is all they think about, they'll beat themselves." That night, after eating alone in the kitchen, I made a cup of mint tea, opened my phone, and logged into Tyler's storage account. With one small tap, the videos from the in-house cameras popped up. I chose the clip from last week's dinner where Brielle said, "We have to get Mom in for a neurocheck soon." I listened to her voice again, calmer than ever. Every word had become admissible evidence, and more than that, a confirmation of the entire plan I had sensed. I set down my tea, opened my notebook, and wrote the day's last line. September 17th. They tried to force a signature. Failed. Time to counterattack. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and in the wooden house's quiet darkness, I smiled for the first time in months. Not a victor's smile, but the smile of someone who has taken back the initiative. After that memory exam, I knew one thing: Brielle wouldn't stop. When one scheme fails, people like her find another way, and I had to stay one step ahead. I sat by the window, looking at the silver 2018 Nissan resting quietly in the afternoon sun. Frank used to call it the faithful car, because in 5 years it never gave me trouble. But now, it wasn't just transportation. It was about to become a weapon in my plan. I opened my laptop and listed it on a local marketplace. 2018 Nissan Altima, fully maintained, single female owner, excellent condition. In less than 2 hours, the phone rang. A deep, clear male voice. "Mrs. Cooper? This is Marcus Ellison. I'm a retired state police colonel. I'm interested in the car you posted. May I come see it this afternoon?" From the way he spoke, I knew he was serious. At 3 p.m., he arrived. A man in his 60s, tall, broad-shouldered, salt and pepper hair, walking with the steadiness of someone trailed by discipline. White button-down fastened to the collar, a steel watch gleaming. He walked around the car, tapped the body, bent to study the paint. "Car's in great shape," he said, a quick smile in his eyes. "You take good care of it. My wife used to fuss over her Camry like that until I let my grandson back it into a light pole, and she was mad at me for a week." I chuckled. "Sometimes a woman only has a few things to tend like herself, Colonel." He nodded, thoughtful for a moment, then said, "I'll buy it. But I do have a flaw. If anyone damages my car, I go after them to the end. I don't let even the smallest scratch slide." I tilted my head and asked, almost casually, "What if someone does it on purpose?" He looked me straight in the eye, voice firm. "Then I file charges immediately. not because of the car's value, but because I hate disrespect of others or of myself. I smiled. Good. My car's about to be in the hands of a principled man. We closed the deal that afternoon. He paid in full by transfer, not a huge amount, but enough for me to deposit into the secret account Maya set up last week. When the Colonel took the keys, I said, "I trust this car will be safe with you." He answered softly but steady, "And I trust that if anyone dares hurt you, they'll learn an expensive lesson." That line warmed me not just because a former officer was backing me up, but because it felt like having an ally, even if he didn't yet know the real plan in motion. That evening, I sat in the kitchen under warm light. I placed the old Nissan key, the extra copy I'd kept, right in the center of the table, easy to spot. I knew Brielle would come. Soon. She had a habit of dropping by to check on me, pretending to care while really inspecting. And just as expected, 2 days later, around 4 p.m., came the knock. "Mom, I came to see you." I opened the door, hiding a smile. "Come in, honey." Brielle walked in with strong perfume and a searching gaze. She made small talk, pretended to care about my health, then her eyes settled on the key ring. "Oh, you still keep the Nissan key?" I shrugged, casual. "Habit. Even if I barely drive it now, I leave it there." "I thought you sold it?" I smiled. "Not yet. I'm still thinking." Brielle gave a light laugh, and that sly glint flashed in her eyes. I knew an idea had just formed in her head. 3 days later, on a Saturday morning, I left early. I parked my rental car in a lot near the grocery store 3 blocks from my house. From there, I could see the alley leading to the lot where Colonel Ellison's Nissan sat, exactly where I used to park for years. I held a small pair of binoculars and stayed quiet in the car. The sun climbed, light filtering through branches and flashing on the pavement. Part of me still couldn't believe she'd go that far. But a mother's instincts don't lie. 11:18 a.m. A red sedan stopped, the door opened, and Brielle stepped out. A baseball cap, sunglasses, and something long and shiny in her hand, a large metal key filed to a point. I held my breath. She looked around, then went to the silver Nissan. She crouched slightly and dragged her hand hard along the door, then down the side. The metal-on-paint screech was chilling. I raised my phone and snapped 3 shots, then switched to video. Every move, every jagged line gouged into the paint, all of it was clear on screen. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow, heavy, strangely calm, no anger. Just confirmation. Everything I'd sensed was true. When Brielle left, I stayed in the car a few more minutes. No cursing, no tears. I simply opened my phone, found Marcus Ellison in my contacts, and hit call. He answered after a few rings. "Mrs. Cooper, is something wrong?" I looked at the shredded car, sunlight skipping across deep gouges like claw marks. "Colonel," I said, slowly, "it's time to make good on your promise." "What do you mean?" "I'll send the video, watch it, and you'll know what to do." His voice dropped, stern. "Understood. I'll take it from here." I hung up and took a long breath. Warm air drifted in through the window with the smell of hot plastic and exhaust, but all I felt was a rare stillness, the calm of knowing the game had turned. I opened my contacts and scrolled to the next name. My finger stopped where it needed to. On the screen, Brielle Collins. I tapped call, watched the light glint in the rear view, and spoke as evenly as if starting a normal conversation. "Okay, Brielle. Let's talk." That afternoon, I sat in the living room, calmer than ever. The last light slid through the curtains, laying pale gold across the floor. The phone on the table rang. Brielle's name lit the screen. I picked up. Her voice was bright, almost satisfied. "Hope you learned your lesson, Marilyn. Your car looks like trash now. Next time, remember who's actually in control." I heard her giggle, music playing in the background. She sounded like she was treating herself for a win. I answered slowly, word by word. "Oh, I learned my lesson, Brielle. It's just that That car isn't mine anymore. Silence. A few seconds later, her voice came back, tight and raspy. What did you say? I smiled. Still even. I sold that Nissan. The buyer is Colonel Marcus Ellison, retired state police, and I think he'll want to know who just shredded his property. A sharp breath came through the line. Then an engine, a car door slamming. Are you threatening me? She screamed. I answered lightly, No, I'm just telling the truth. And if you still don't believe me, here's one more thing. The cameras recorded everything. Your actions, your face. I hung up. In under 10 minutes, sirens wailed down the street. Through the window, I saw a black and white cruiser pull up by the lot. 2 officers got out with Colonel Ellison. He spoke firmly while playing the video on his phone. They walked to the gouged Nissan, took photos, measured. Brielle stood there pale, hair blown messy by the wind. She tried to say something, but her voice shook too hard to make sense. I didn't go out. I just eased the curtain and watched through the slit. I felt no anger, only a quiet feeling justice. Justice isn't revenge. It's order returning after someone twisted it. My phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. Mom, what are you doing? Why are cops at our place? I didn't reply. I set the phone down and poured more tea. 5 minutes later, a second text. Brielle says you set her up. Did you? I sighed. That's what hurt most, Lucas still believing her with the truth right there. I wouldn't argue by text. 15 minutes later, I heard his car at the gate. He walked in, face torn between anger and confusion. Mom, I need you to explain this. I pointed at the chair. Sit. We talk like two adults. Lucas sat, forcing calm. I don't understand. Brielle says you staged this to get her arrested. She was just checking the car. She didn't do anything. I stayed quiet a moment, then took out my phone and opened Tyler's app. On the screen, a crisp video of Brielle scratching the car, her face tight, eyes full of hate. The metal on paint scrape came through clear. Lucas stared. His face went white. No way. And this, I said, opening the second folder, is the audio from last week's dinner. Brielle's voice filled the room. You need to get Mom in for a neurocheck soon. If the doctor confirms it, the power of attorney gets easier. Lucas dropped his head, hands clenched together, shaking. I spoke slowly. You see, I don't have to invent anything. They said it themselves. After a long while, Lucas looked up, eyes red. I believed her. I thought you were suspicious. I thought you were lonely and imagining things. His voice cracked. She said if I just helped a little, everything would be fine. You call lying, forging signatures, damaging property, and trying to dump your mother in a nursing home helping a little? I asked, not loud, but sharp as a blade. He was silent. A tear fell onto his hand. Mom, I was wrong. I shook my head, still calm. You were wrong, but I'm sorry isn't enough. Forgiveness doesn't come from tears, Lucas. It comes from action. He looked at me like he was waiting for the rest. I set down my cup and met his eyes. If you truly want to make this right, do 3 things. First, divorce. Not because I demand it, but because this marriage is killing you little by little. Second, therapy. You've been manipulated long enough. If you don't look back, you'll repeat this in the next relationship. Third, respect boundaries. I'm not someone you can lean on or control anymore. If you want to stay in my life, come as a grown man, not a child asking for money or pity. Lucas sat still. I saw the fight in his eyes, guilt, shame, and a love he hadn't found words for yet. Finally he nodded, voice hoarse, I'll do it. I don't want to lose you again. I rested my hand on his shoulder. I don't want to lose you, but I won't accept being hurt anymore. We sat like that for a long time. Outside, late light spread across the porch, warming the old family photo Frank alive, Lucas 12, a wide, innocent smile. I looked at it and felt a quiet ache. When Lucas left, he didn't say goodbye. He paused at the door, turned his back to me, and said in a raw voice, "I'll talk to a lawyer. And I'll fix all of it." The door closed, leaving a still space. I knew he was crying, but I didn't follow. Sometimes people need to hurt on their own to learn how to stand. That evening, the phone rang. Colonel Marcus Ellison. "Mrs. Cooper, the young woman has been brought in for a statement. I think you should rest. Things will be clear soon." I nodded softly. "Thank you, Colonel. I owe you not for today's actions, but for helping me believe there are still principled people." He let out a small laugh. "No thanks needed, Mrs. Cooper. I'm just keeping my word. You, on the other hand, did what many can't. You stood up for yourself." After hanging up, I went to the porch and sat in Frank's old wooden chair. Savannah's night sky was clean, a few stars winking in the dark. I sipped my cooled tea, oddly peaceful. The trap had sprung. The truth was out. No more hiding, no more pretending. And in that quiet moment, I realized what made me strong wasn't a clever plan, but the belief that I deserve protection, even if I have to be the one to do it. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind in the pines, whispering, "Frank, rest easy." I won not by striking back, but by keeping myself. On Monday morning, I arrived at attorney Maya Brooks's office an hour early. Savannah was hushed low gray clouds, fresh air after a night rain, water droplets on car windows catching the weak sun. Maya was already in the conference room with a thick stack of files, neatly labeled assets, forged transactions, video evidence, audio recordings. She looked at me with a light smile and steel in her eyes. "Are you ready?" she asked. "I'm ready," I said, straightening my collar. Right at 9 a.m., Colonel Marcus Ellison walked in, white shirt, navy blazer, steady steps. Behind him came Hal Stein, Brielle's attorney. And finally, Brielle, hair curled into neat waves, face pale, dark circles under her eyes. I looked at her without anger, only tiredness and the sense of someone who had survived a storm. Hal Stein opened his briefcase, voice polite with a touch of forced warmth. "Mrs. Cooper, my client, miss." Brielle Collins wishes to express deep remorse for what happened. She recognizes her actions were impulsive mistakes. We'd like to discuss a resolution. Full restitution for the vehicle damage, a formal written apology, and in return, you withdraw the criminal complaint. That way, both sides can close the past peacefully. Maya glanced at me, waiting. I placed my hands on the table and said evenly, "No." Hal blinked, leaning back slightly in his chair. "I'm sorry. Do you mean—" "I said no," I repeated, slower, clearer. "I've spent too many years believing silence keeps the peace. Turns out it only makes people think I'm weak." The air in the room grew heavy. Brielle squirmed, her hands clenching together. Maya opened the file stack and slid it toward Hal. "Before we discuss settlement, you need to review these. This is evidence of a scheme to forge a power of attorney, including a fake sample of Mrs. Cooper's signature, a request for certified copies of the deed, and an audio recording of Miss Collins planning with her husband." Hal bent to read, his brow tightening. "Are these authenticated?" Maya answered, voice like steel, all notarized, time-stamped, and stored in an independent system. In addition, we have video of the property damage captured by Colonel Ellison's camera and provided by Mrs. Cooper herself. The colonel nodded. "I've forwarded everything to state police. The vandalism case can be filed at any time." The room fell silent. Brielle stared down, biting her lip until it bled. I looked at her and saw the collapse in her eyes. I spoke slowly, each word clear. "Before any apology, I have 5 conditions. If you accept them, I'll agree to let Colonel Ellison withdraw the criminal complaint once every obligation is met. If not, I'll proceed with additional charges for fraud and document forgery." Hal looked up, cautious. "Please state them." I took a breath and turned the page I'd prepared. First, full restitution for all damages, including Colonel Ellison's repair, costs, reputational harm, and legal fees. Second, a written confession, acknowledging all deceit, signed and notarized. Third, finalize the divorce from Lucas Cooper within 30 days. Fourth, a commitment to stay away from me and my property no closer than 650 feet. Fifth, no request for alimony or division of marital assets in any form. I lifted my head and looked Brielle straight on. If you refuse, I will make sure you stand before a judge, not just for a scratched car, but for organized deception. Brielle burst into tears. Not the cry of an arrogant woman, but of someone who knows she just buried her future. She sobbed, choking on words. Mom, Marilyn, I'm sorry. I don't know how it all came to this. I just wanted... I cut in, calm and even. No, it's Mrs. Cooper, thank you. Brielle froze, tears spilling. She understood I had just severed the last thread between us. Hal started to speak, but Colonel Ellison raised a hand. Mr. Stein, I think your client should listen closely to her attorney. Maya followed, cool as ice. Miss Collins, if you accept these conditions, we'll assist the Colonel in filing to withdraw the criminal case after restitution is completed and the divorce is finalized. If not, you're facing 6 months to 2 years in custody, plus a permanent criminal record. The room was so quiet you could hear the clock tick. Hal Stein gave Brielle a small nod. Miss Collins, I advise you to sign. This is the least damaging option. Still sobbing, her hands shaking, Brielle picked up the pen. She looked at me one last time, searching for pity, but I gave none. She signed messy strokes, ink bleeding into the page. When she finished, she slumped into the chair, tears falling non-stop. Maya gathered the papers, crisp and efficient. This becomes legally binding once notarized. Copies go to your attorney and to Colonel Ellison. The Colonel nodded, standing. Once I receive full restitution, I'll file to withdraw the criminal case. I'm doing it for Mrs. Cooper, not for you. Brielle nodded weakly and murmured, I understand. As everyone stood, the room felt lighter, like a ton had been set down. I gathered my bag and rose slowly. Maya set a hand on my shoulder, her voice gentler. You did it. This isn't a win, it's the restoration of what's right. I smiled, small but real. Justice has a price, Maya. I'm paying it with what I've endured. As I turned toward the door, Brielle suddenly spoke, voice raw but bitter. You'll end up alone, Marilyn. Even your son will leave. You'll grow old by yourself. I paused at the threshold, didn't turn, and said softly, Maybe. But at least I'll be free. I pushed the door open and stepped out, leaving behind the sobs and the dry scratch of one last pen stroke in a silent room. Outside, Savannah's sunlight was clear and bright. Last night's rain had washed the dust from the streets, leaving the smell of damp grass and a soft breeze. I drew a deep breath and took the steps slowly. In my bag, the sealed copy of the signed conditions rested like a period at the end of the darkest chapter of my life. There was no gloating, no triumph. Only relief, like setting down a weight I'd carried too long. I knew there wouldn't be many people around me from now on, but that no longer scared me. For the first time in years, I wasn't living out of fear or guilt. I walked on, slow and steady, through the busy street, thinking, justice isn't payback. It's the moment you stop letting others define your worth. After that decisive meeting at Maya's office, my life went quiet. No more midnight calls, no more fake knocks at the door, no more calculated smiles. Just the 2-story wooden house, so still I could hear the living room clock marking time. But the quiet wasn't entirely comfortable. It left a space, and in that space, the name Lucas echoed heavy, confused, aching. My son had left Brielle, just as the agreement required. The divorce went through quickly, no tears, no battles, 2 people stepping out of each other's lives with a cold sheet of paper. And then, Lucas had nowhere to go. He moved out of the place where I'd once paid the deposit. Work suffered from the rumors around the case. The friends Brielle had introduced kept their distance. I heard he was holed up in a small rental on Savannah's south side, one twin bed, one table, a window facing a parking lot. I didn't visit, not out of anger, but because I knew he needed to face himself. But every Sunday night I sent short texts. Have you eaten? Don't miss rent. Go to bed early. Wake up earlier. No, I miss you. No, I forgive you. I kept clear boundaries so he'd understand love doesn't mean letting someone hurt you again. One February afternoon, Lucas called. His voice was low and rough, like after a long night. Mom, I started therapy. I was quiet for a few seconds. Good. Were you going to hide that from me? He gave a small laugh. I was afraid you'd think I was performing, but the doctor says I'm emotionally dependent, that I keep looking for someone like you in every relationship, then try to fix them, the way I thought I had to save Brielle. I leaned back in my chair, heart sinking a little. People often confuse love with fear, Lucas. Someone who truly loves doesn't try to fix anyone. He was silent, like he was writing every word down. In the following weeks, Maya told me Lucas had started taking freelance interior design work and was paying down old debts. I didn't help. I didn't send money. I didn't step in. Only once, when he called and asked, Mom, if I can't make it this month, will you help? I answered plainly, I'll help by teaching you how to write a deferment request, not by paying it for you. He gave a strained chuckle. You're never easy. I smiled. What's hard is what we remember. 3 months passed, and Lucas began to change. His voice steadied, less complaining. He started saying, I'm responsible, instead of, I didn't mean to. That didn't come from magic, but from work, loneliness, and awareness, things he'd lacked. One early spring evening, he called me. Mom, this might sound dumb, but I used to think Brielle was an escape. She made me feel seen. I answered softly, You didn't notice she only saw the parts of you that benefited her. When someone loves you because they need something from you, that's not love, that's a transaction. Lucas sighed. I get it now. Maybe I treated you that way too. I said nothing. Sometimes truth needs saying, not dissecting. That night, I wrote in my journal, My son is walking a tightrope. But this time, he isn't blindfolded. And I'll stand below, not to catch him, but to witness. A week later, Lucas stopped by. He was thinner, but his eyes were different, less fear, more calm. He brought white tulips and a bag of fresh roasted coffee. For you. I miss this smell, he said. I took them, smiling lightly. The smell of honesty, I hope. He sat at the kitchen table, where we'd had dozens of tense dinners before. I know I can't apologize forever. I want to do something to make it right, I asked. With words or actions? He met my eyes. Actions. I'll come every Sunday, help fix the backyard, clean out the garage, whatever you need. Just say you'll have dinner with me. I stayed quiet a moment, then said, Okay, but there's one condition. What is it? No lying. Not about the smallest thing. I don't need what's easy to hear. I need what's true. Lucas nodded, voice steady. I promise. Our first Sunday dinner in years was strangely peaceful. I made Frank's favorite stew. Lucas brought dessert from the old place he and his dad used to visit. In the table, we didn't talk about the past. We didn't say her name. We didn't weigh right or wrong. We talked about small things, the jasmine outside, yesterday's rain, and how the hallway light finally got a new bulb. Midway through, Lucas looked up and said softly, I didn't think you'd forgive me. I looked at him, voice barely more than a breath. I don't need to forgive, Lucas. I just need you to learn what took me half a lifetime to understand. Self-respect is the last fence of kindness. He was quiet, eyes shining. When dinner ended, Lucas stood to do the dishes. I watched him from behind, thinner but steady. Something in the kitchen's warm light made me think of Frank, the same calm, the same choice to make amends with deeds, not words. That night, walking him to the door, the air carried the damp smell of earth and dry leaves. He turned back and said quietly, "I'll be back early next Sunday." I nodded, smiling. "Come back, but remember, no lying." He laughed. "I wouldn't dare, Mom." I watched his car taillights fade past the gate, and for the first time in years the house's quiet didn't feel lonely. Because now, silence wasn't emptiness, it was the sign that something was healing. I still remember the first morning after that Sunday dinner with Lucas. Savannah's sunlight slanted through the kitchen window, warming a cup of coffee and the orchid I'd just repotted. Everything was peaceful, truly peaceful, the kind I hadn't dared hope for in years. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life like this, tending the garden, reading, cooking, waiting for Lucas to drop by. But life had another chapter for me, one I hadn't prepared for, but was ready to welcome. One early March afternoon, my longtime neighbor, Mrs. Dolores King, knocked on my door. She carried a basket of still warm muffins, face bright. "Marilyn, you know your story's all over the neighborhood, right?" I paused. "Which story?" "The one where your daughter-in-law tried to take your house, and you fought back with cameras and the law," she whispered, eyes shining. "I shared it with a few women at church. Now everyone wants to ask you how to protect their assets." I laughed, a little embarrassed. "I'm no expert, but you stood up. A lot of women our age get taken advantage of by family and don't know where to start. They need someone like you." I fell quiet. Her words stayed with me. 3 days later, when the knock came again, I wasn't surprised. This time, 3 older women stood on the porch, notebooks in hand, faces a mix of shyness and hope. "We're friends of Mrs. Dolores. She said you could show us how to keep our house papers safe." I invited them in, poured tea, and for 2 hours we talked like old friends. They told me about daughters-in-law holding their passbooks for safekeeping, about being pushed to sign powers of attorney, about family investments. My heart tightened as I listened. When they left, I knew I couldn't stop there. The next week, I pinned a small note on the church board. "Wednesday Women's Group. Learn to protect yourself and your property. Meet at Marilyn Cooper's, 4 p.m. every Wednesday. Bring a notebook and your story." The first meeting had 4, the second, 8, then 12. They brought coffee, pastries, and messy folders. I drafted a survival checklist, a playful name everyone knew was serious. 1. Write a clear will and keep it in 2 trusted places. 2. Keep a list of digital accounts, passwords, and a lawful designated agent. 3. Install in-home cameras within legal guidelines. 4. Name a trusted person outside the family attorney. Close neighbor. 5. Never sign anything you don't fully understand. Each week, we picked a topic from reading contracts and spotting loving scams to recognizing emotional manipulation. The more we shared, the more women spoke up. Some cried from being heard for the first time. Some trembled as they held papers that had been hidden for years. In those wrinkled hands, I saw myself the woman who once shook, once feared, once thought, "I'm old, I should stay quiet." One afternoon, a young woman around 28 came by. She stood at the door with an envelope, voice gentle. "I'm Andrea Collins, Brielle's niece." I stiffened for a moment, but her tone wasn't like Brielle's, no chill, no edge, more like exhaustion. "I'm not here to defend her," she said quickly. "I just want to thank you. If it weren't for your case, my grandmother might never have dared tell the truth." She handed me a handwritten letter, her hands trembling. My grandmother was tricked, likely by Brielle, into investing in a fake beauty salon. She lost nearly $20,000 and never dared report it to the police. I opened the letter. The handwriting shook, with ink smeared in places. "Thank you, woman I've never met, for exposing that devil. Maybe because of you, I'll finally sleep tonight." I set the letter on the table and looked at Andrea. "Thank you for bringing it. Would you like to join the Wednesday group?" She nodded, eyes wet. "I think my grandmother would want me to." That night I told Maya. She went still. "You know, this could open a new prosecution. If Andrea's grandmother signs, we can submit more evidence to the DA." 2 weeks later, Maya brought news. 3 more victims have come forward. Same pattern. Brielle preys on trust, builds a fake closeness, then steals assets. I was silent for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because deep down I'd always sensed Brielle wasn't just greedy, she was a structured predator. By month's end, the phone rang. It was Colonel Ellison. "Mrs. Cooper, I wanted you to know the DA has opened a separate case against Brielle Collins. I can't share details, but they have enough to dig deeper. Prison. Time is possible." I sat still, looking out at the yard. The wind moved through the leaves, soft as a sigh. "I'm not happy about it, Colonel," I said slowly. "I just feel at ease. Justice isn't to make someone suffer, it's to reassure others they won't be hurt again," he reflected. "You're right. Not everyone understands that line." From then on, the Wednesday Women's Group kept growing. My living room couldn't hold us, so we moved to the church hall. Mrs. Dolores baked, Andrea handled the printouts, and I sat in the circle saying sentences that seem simple but take forever to learn. "I don't agree. I need time to review. I'm saying no." Each time someone said their first real no, everyone clapped. In their eyes, I saw the light I'd once lost, the light of self-respect. One afternoon, as the group broke up, Andrea came to me and asked quietly, "Do you ever regret it, making everything so public?" I smiled. Yes. In those first nights, I wished none of it had happened, but not anymore. Because if I'd stayed silent, more people would be hurt. "And the noise you hear, that's the sound of people learning to stand up." She nodded, smiling. "You don't know this, but they call you Steel Marilyn." I laughed. "Steel rusts too, dear. But once you grind it clean, it shines brighter." That night I went home, sat by the window, and listened to the crickets in the yard. On the table were thank you notes from women who'd saved their assets and a bouquet of white tulips Lucas had left that afternoon. I wrote in my journal, "Justice isn't only a verdict. Sometimes it's a circle of women who know how to protect themselves, a son relearning honesty, and an old woman finding meaning in the late afternoon of life." I looked up and out the window. Lights came on across the neighborhood, and I knew, even late as it was, a new chapter was starting, one of freedom and sharing. That afternoon, while I was trimming lavender in the garden, a familiar car stopped at the gate. I looked up Lucas. He got out with a folder and a bag of fresh roasted coffee. His smile was tentative, but his eyes were different. Steady, grown, no longer dodging. "Are you free?" "I've got something to talk about," he asked. I nodded, smiling slightly. "If it's not about money or Brielle, I'm always free." Lucas laughed, real laughter, not forced. He stepped into the kitchen and set the papers down. "This is my payoff plan. 18 months total. I've run the numbers. If nothing changes, I'll clear every debt before your next birthday." I looked over the budget, every line neat and careful. Income, rent, a set amount for debt, even a small emergency fund. When I finished, my throat tightened. Not because of the math, but because for the first time in years, I saw my son taking responsibility for his own life. "You did this by yourself?" "With help from my therapist and from Maya," Lucas said. "She told me to make a real plan instead of saying, 'I'll try.' So this is my try." I nodded, smiling lightly. "All right, I accept this plan, but if you're about to ask me to sign something else, that's not a given. Lucas shook his head and pulled out another paper, folded neatly. "No signature needed. This one's mine." I opened it. A printout from the law office, renunciation of inheritance during the lifetime of Mrs. Marilyn Cooper. Below was Lucas's signature, clean and firm. I froze, eyes blurring. "Lucas, you—" He set a hand on my shoulder, voice steady. "Mom, I don't want anything but your peace. Everything you have, you worked a lifetime to earn. I won't be the reason you fear losing it ever again." I couldn't hold back the tears. I'd thought that day would never come, the day my son understood that love doesn't come with entitlement. "You're really growing up," I whispered, smiling through tears, "and I finally get to be the mother of a man, not of a boy." The afternoon slipped by like smoke. We decided to go grocery shopping together for the first time in almost 7 years. Lucas pushed the cart. I picked vegetables. We laughed at little things. A squashed loaf, a cashier who talked a mile a minute, me forgetting my canvas bags again. "Mom, I haven't seen you smile this much," Lucas said as we stood in line. "Maybe because I don't have to be on guard today," I answered. "I just get to be a mom." We brought home bags full cold cuts, fresh greens, eggs, and waffle mix. Lucas insisted on cooking. "Time I made up for all those years you cooked alone." I didn't argue. I let him fumble through the kitchen, clumsy but determined. As butter melted in the pan and that warm, sweet smell filled the house, I realized healing doesn't always come from apologies. Sometimes it's as simple as this. Before dinner, I set 3 plates and turned to Lucas. "You know, we need 3 new rules for this relationship." "Rules? You still sound like a lawyer," he joked. I said, "Honesty, respect, no toxicity. If any one of those breaks, I step back." Lucas nodded, solemn, like he was signing a contract. "Deal. And if I break them, you can ban me from waffles for life." We laughed, our laughter carrying through the kitchen, warm as those summers when Frank was still here. Over dinner, Lucas talked about therapy. He spoke about the guilt that still clung to him every night. "Mom, sometimes I look in the mirror and still see a traitor. I don't know how to forgive myself." I looked at my son, tired eyes, but honest. "Lucas, guilt is only useful if you turn it into action. Otherwise, it's just another shackle. You don't need forgiveness, you need responsibility and forward motion." He nodded, biting his lip. "I'm trying." "Good, I don't want you living to atone, I want you living to be." After dinner, I wrote a small note, my hand shaky but clear. "I love you, but I love myself too." I folded it and handed it to him. "Keep it in your wallet. When you feel lost, read it." Lucas held it for a long moment, then tucked it behind the photo of me and Frank. "I'll carry it like a vow." I didn't answer, just rested my hand on his shoulder, feeling that warmth I'd feared was gone forever. That evening I invited Colonel Marcus Ellison and Joanne Patel for dinner. They'd become close friends, quiet companions through the storm. The colonel brought a bottle of red. Joanne arrived with a bundle of dried lavender. "I think this house needs more of the scent of peace," she said with a bright smile. Lucas opened the door, shook the colonel's hand, polite and steady. Watching them, I felt lighter. Maybe for the first time in years, my kitchen held both life and calm at once. The waffles were done, sweet and buttery, scent mixing with cinnamon. The colonel ate and laughed. "Mrs. Cooper, next time open a bakery. I'll be your first regular," Joanne added, "and I'll handle your business license." Across the table, Lucas looked around and said softly, "I don't remember a dinner that felt like this light, real, not trying to prove anything." I smiled at him. "That's simple happiness, son. The kind I had to travel a long way to find again." After our guests left, I stood on the porch, moonlight washing over the lavender. In the kitchen, the scent of waffles lingered and soft jazz played while Lucas did the dishes. I closed my eyes and let myself settle into the sound. No booming victory, no dramatic finale. Just a peaceful night when I knew things were finally set right. I whispered to Frank in my heart, "See? We have a real home again, not because of walls and roof, but because love returned, whole and unafraid." That morning, Savannah sunlight poured down like honey. Lucas and I stood in the yard, hands dirty, planting climbing roses along the wooden fence. The smell of damp soil, fertilizer, and new sun folded into one, a feeling I hadn't had in a long time, a true beginning. Bent over with a small spade, Lucas mounded earth around a root ball, voice easy as the breeze. "Mom, if these make it through winter, I'll build a trellis over the porch. Next year's going to be beautiful." I watched my son sweat on his brow, strong hands, and felt as calm as a lake after a storm. "Care for them honestly and they'll live, Lucas. Same with you, sometimes people just need time and the right light." He looked up and smiled. "I've got both now, Mom." News about Brielle still popped up in the local paper now and then. My chest didn't tighten anymore. The latest piece said she was facing another lawsuit, this time over an investment scam. Maya texted, "If convicted, she might actually serve time." I replied, "I hope she learns the lesson not in prison, but in her conscience." No one can reclaim the past, but I believe sometimes justice lives in the moment you realize there's no one left to blame. Days slipped into an easy rhythm. The Wednesday Women's Group had 20 members now, all ages from an 82-year-old widow to a 30-something bank clerk. We didn't just cover documents and laws, we practiced emotional self-defense, how to say no, how to hold boundaries, how to leave without guilt. At one meeting, Andrea Brielle's niece stood and shared, "I used to think older women were fragile. After meeting Mrs. Marilyn, I know they just needed a guide. And today, I want to be that for my grandmother." The room applauded, and I simply smiled, light as air. It turns out a personal tragedy can be a seed for wider change. That night I opened my journal, the old leather one Frank gave me for our 20th anniversary. On its time-darkened pages, I wrote 3 words: home, power, dignity. 3 short words, but the sum of everything I'd walked through. Home, not just shelter, but the safe ground I rebuilt with wit and courage. Power, not from youth, but from facing and not running. Dignity, the thing I lost when I bowed my head, and found again when I lifted it. Looking back, I no longer shook at the shameful memories. The tears of those years no longer burned, they tasted like experience of a life lived and still standing. One afternoon, resting on the porch after gardening, Lucas watched the new roses and asked quietly, "Mom, do you ever get tired of having to be strong all the time?" I smiled, gentle but firm. "Being older doesn't mean being weak, son. I only get tired when I'm forced to prove that to someone who doesn't deserve to hear it." Lucas nodded and said softly, "I know now, Mom." I looked at him and smiled. "We don't erase the past, Lucas. We fix the future. The past, well, it's proof we've lived long enough to learn that." I stood, went inside, and poured a cup of mint tea. The fresh scent drifted through the kitchen, a place that once held harsh words, now filled with laughter and waffles every weekend. Outside, the climbing roses had begun to curl up the fence, reaching for the sunlight like they wanted to bloom a little more. I leaned against the doorframe, looked out at the garden, and smiled. At last, freedom had a scent of its own. And if you're still here with me now, tell me where you're listening from. Every comment you leave is a warm footprint on my path. If this story made you think of someone, a mom, a grandmother, or even yourself, please like, share, and subscribe so I know you're still here, keeping the flame of kindness and dignity with me. Thank you for staying with me to the end so I wouldn't have to tell this alone. I took a slow sip of tea, listened to the wind through the roses, and felt my heart quiet and whole. No blazing victory, no showy glory, just a 62-year-old woman, standing in the morning light, knowing she survived, is loved, and is free.